Hello everyone and welcome to this Nintendo Life episode 194. My name is NBZ and I am the hottest influencer in town. Let me tell you why. Go ahead to tiktok.com and find me repping hot TikToks over there. That's me, NBZ on TikTok. Check it out. Give me likes, comment, share my posts. I'm a hot TikTok influencer, Bally. You gotta get on the scene, I'm down with the kids. I'm checking it out, I'm doing all the cool stuff.
You did a good TikTok.
I did. I've done lots of good TikToks, man.
You've done lots now.
I'm popping off. You gotta do 2 a day. I'm fucking reading about the algorithm. It's great. Hi, I'm NBZ. I'm joined by Bally. How are you doing, Bally?
I'm doing very well. I'm still TikTokless.
You're TikTokless. You got to download the app, man. Get on it, and figure out what is going on.
I just, I get this like creative block that I just can't.
I'm not even talking about making stuff, man, because I know you don't, not like me, going on YouTube and all these places making things.
I'm just a voyeur over here.
You're a voyeur, but you do a podcast, of course, which you're on right now.
I do, yeah. I'm putting things together. I'm saying things.
But I know that, most people who own TikTok, they just download the app and scroll. And let me tell you, it's maybe the scariest fucking algorithm in the entire universe, because they, I don't know what fucking juice they have over there, but they make that app the most addictive thing on the planet Earth, and it's very hard for me to stop. Anyway, if you're wondering why I'm talking about TikTok, basically work was like, hey, figure out TikTok, go research it and like make it for our games.
You're a young person.
You're a young person.
What is a TikTok?
And so I did. I've been doing that for work reasons, but as a result of that, I was like, hey, why don't I just start my own TikTok? So that's what I've done, and let's see if I can pop off on there, because it is, funnily enough, it's one of those platforms which is actually the easiest to grow on right now. You can just you can blow up with one TikTok, and
it's like YouTube 2009.
Kinda, yeah. And I got a lot of experience YouTube 2009. Let me tell you what. So perfectly positioned here to.
Yeah, I was very impressed by your first TikTok. I was like, oh, what's he put together? And then I was like, yeah, this has Gen Z energy coming out here right now. It's got the loud dance music that just comes in randomly and very loudly and blows my ears apart. So yeah, that's a successful TikTok in my book. Look,
what I will say about that app is that on PC, it is way too fucking loud. Holy shit. Like, you go from YouTube, like whatever volume you're watching YouTube on, you go to TikTok, and it just blows your speakers out, because for whatever reason, their audio mix is like 25 decibels or something stupid. And I don't understand why.
But do you edit the video in TikTok? Is that why it's so popular? Did you make all of it inside TikTok?
I made it all inside the app, which is it's a really interesting thing to me. We're talking a lot about TikTok here. I'm sure we'll do a bonus bits on TikTok at some point in time. Go even
all our Gen Z listeners falling asleep right now.
But it's really interesting to me as a video editor, as like someone who understands that stuff, of like, oh, there's actually kind of some stuff in here that is teaching people like the fundamentals of video editing in some ways, very basically, but it's interesting because they have some ways in which you can cut clips down and move audio about to realign stuff and sync things and that type of stuff, which is pretty cool. But anyway, as I said, find me on TikTok, just search NBZ, I'm there. Watch my Pikachu TikTok. It's very good.
Has it blown up? Has the reaction been good yet?
Hasn't blown up. I'm waiting to blow up. I've been doing.
How many hits has it got? Is that the right word? What's a hit?
Hits, yeah, hits. So that's what the kids say. I did. So I've been doing this. My main idea for my TikTok is to do like video game sounds, satisfying video game sounds. And so I've done the screw attack from Metroid Fusion. I've done Dorf Romantic with little blip blop blip blop blink. Very nice sounds.
And you're just recording the game audio live.
Literally just pointing my camera at a screen and recording it. That's the TikTok vibe, man. No high quality here. This is all budget. It's all about budget. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to blow up off of satisfying game sounds. That's my aim right now. 2 TikToks a day. Let's see how it goes. I'll update you next time on my progress. Excellent. But we're not here to talk about that, Bally. We're talking about real video games, what people have made and what we have played. So do you want to tell people what the show's going to be about today?
We're going to be a 2-segment show today. For the first segment, we're going to talk about a ton of games that we have been playing. And then for the second segment, it is the time for our Backlog Club. We are going to talk about Paper Mario on the N64. We've both beaten that game. Both have a lot of thoughts. Everyone's been writing in with their own thoughts on the game. So we're going to share all those and have a really good discussion.
Absolutely. Will be a beefy one, so look forward to it. But let's jump in and talk about video games. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of a preface to this, because one of the things we've played is related to the Indie World, a showcase that happened recently, a little while ago now for most of you listening, of course. Nintendo never listens to our recording schedule, always goes off on their own ideas.
I mean, I think they do listen to our recording schedule because they always put one out just after an episode comes out.
Yes, really inconvenient for everything we do. But yeah, this was a nice little indie world, as they have been want to call them now, rebranded. And I like Nindies as a word, but I think indie world, just as long as it's consistent, right? Because they used to be just really inconsistent with how they named these things. And yeah, it was a good one. I think there were some neat things in here. Certainly some known names as well as unknown names popping up throughout this. Bally, was there anything that stood out to you that you wanna chat about real quick from this indie world?
Two things I'm most hyped for. One is Oxenfree 2. I really enjoyed the first Oxenfree, which I think came to Switch around the Switch's launch in 2017.
Yeah, it was one of the first older indie games to be like, yeah, we'll be on the platform.
Yeah.
I like Oxenfree. I don't think I'm over the moon about it. I think it's a cool narrative game, but I think there are a lot better narrative games that I have played out there.
I think what's cool about it is that for such a small game, it is still fully voice acted, which I feel like a lot of the smaller games tend to be more written only, which I'm not saying written is better than voice acting or vice versa. I'm just saying it's quite nice to have quite a small game that is so fully voice acted. Yeah,
for certain. And that game has some weird, creepy horror elements that even at the time I was like, oh, okay, this is maybe a little spooky.
Even now, I just remember it as a vibe rather than actually what happens in that story, which I need to maybe check back in before playing this sequel, which I think they've estimated is going to be some point this year.
I think so, yeah. And I wonder if it's the same cast of characters, if you're following a different group. It seems like actually the main character is the same. So that'll be interesting, because that was kind of I wouldn't say self-contained story. I think it probably did leave a couple of hooks there for what could happen potentially afterwards. And but I'm interested to see what people think about that, because it was one of those games that I think, when it came out, it got hyped by a bunch of people on Games Media Twitter, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when I actually played it, I was like, okay, I mean, I think it was overhyped for me in some ways. I think it's good, but it's not kind of the level that I think I expected it maybe to be. But you know what? Sequel could be fantastic. Interested in it. And it's interesting because that studio made After Party, and I don't think After Party did that well. So it's interesting to see that they've kind of just gone back to their name that made them popular with Oxenfree. And that's the tough thing about the indie kind of situation sometimes, is like you have a big hit and then you put out something else and no one plays it, and then you just have to go back and go. It's the same thing that happened to Rogue Legacy. Those devs made some other game, and I can't even remember the name of it. It speaks to just how it just kind of got lost in the shuffle, and then they're like, well, I guess we're just going to go back to the name that people know. It's interesting, because it's very rare that you have studios like Supergiant who can just be like, oh, we're just making unique games every time, and they're always a big deal and they're always a big hit.
I'm also very excited for Art of Rally, although that game was already out on PC and it didn't look like it ran the best on this show. And you just told me that it's coming to Game Pass in the summer, so I'm not really feeling it for Switch, but it's still a game I'm interested in. I just think it's got a nice art style. It's like Lonely Mountains Downhill, but Rally. Yeah.
Are you into that kind of top-down isometric style kind of racing game? Have you played many of those before in the past?
I'm going back a long way if I've played something like it.
Because like when you think about the GBA kind of racing games, they always aped the kind of Mario Kart 64 behind the back style of racing. This is, I'm thinking more like, what's that game on Super Nintendo where it is kind of top-down isometric? They used to have a lot of these types of games.
Like the Hot Wheels series and stuff. Yeah.
Right, yeah, that type of stuff.
I tell you what, I have played. My cousin, a very long time ago, bought Wave Race on the Game Boy.
Oh, boy.
Which is actually...
Not even Game Boy Advance, just original Game Boy?
Not even Game Boy Advance. Wow. There's only 3 Wave Race games: Blue Storm, 64, and Game Boy. And
damn, dude.
And my cousin bought the Game Boy game. At the time, I bought like some sort of awful Looney Tunes racer on my Game Boy Color, which really regretted. But the Wave Race game was top down, and I played a bit of it from borrowed it from him and played it, and it was actually really cool. So that was my reference point for
All right.
a top-down racing game. There you go.
Cool. Well, there you go. Great. Yeah. For me, the one that was the biggest deal was Ollie Ollie World. As you all know,
It does look really cool.
I love Ollie Ollie 1 and 2. I think those are just fantastic feeling games. Like, they're this kind of blend between platformer and skateboarding game, and I think that they're a dream to control, and they are complicated to control, right? Like, it's definitely, when I first played Ollie Ollie, I was like, wow, this is weird. Like, the way that you jump and land and grind, it doesn't feel necessarily natural, but once you understand it, once you get into it, it feels super satisfying to pull off with the analog stick and grinding. And man, I love that series, and this looks like a brand new art style, a little more adventure-y in terms of its exploration and like having characters that you talk to. I think everything about this looks fantastic, and it seems like a step up, right? Because they could have been like Ollie Ollie 3, same art style, more levels, and I wouldn't have been that interested. I would say, like, I probably would have played it because I love the series, but I think I always like when a developer takes an idea and is like, okay, we're going to do this, but we're going to do this to the next level, and that feels like what this is.
I liked Ollie Ollie, but I'm now much more excited by this game by the fact they are changing up the style. Like, I'm really excited to jump in and just try out like what this kind of more open experience is like.
For sure, yeah. I also really want to play There Is No Game Wrong Dimension, which Jeff Gersman talked a bunch about in Giant Bomb's Game of the Year for 2020, and it sounds like a very funny, off-the-wall game that I would want to check out, and seems like it kind of goes into video game conventions and breaking them and that type of thing. So
it's already out.
It's already out. It's on Switch. It shadow dropped on the day of the Direct, and I will probably pick that up at some point this year and check it out. And I also wanted to shout out the pixel art in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles side-scrolling beat-em-up, which I was not a big fan of the kind of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World game that I think the studio worked on. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I think this is... I don't know who this is. You know what? I don't know who this is, but the fucking pixel art is really good. That's all I'll say. And I'm not, again, that into beat 'em ups, but I did love Streets of Rage 4 last year. So maybe...
if we can do some online co-op, I think it'd be a blast.
Yes, absolutely. I think that would be very fun. Any other smaller ones, Bally, from here? I think for the most part, that's what I was interested in. But there were some other interesting things.
I think I told you that I had no interest in Fez, when what I meant to say was I got that game confused with Braid because they're both on the same show, and I don't want to play Braid ever in my life, but I should probably try Fez at some point.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I was confused when you were like, I would hate Fez, and I was like, meh, I guess you probably would hate Fez, to be honest. So, you know, maybe you would. But I did.
Give it a go, maybe. But it's cool that game's coming to Switch. Been a bit of time, like a random time in 2021, bring Fez to Switch, but
I know, it is strange. But again, that is a wild video game that is not what you think it is. And I did play it. I don't think I really got the most out of Fez that I could, but again, I think you can only get the most out of Fez if you play it in a vacuum, or at least back then, played it at the time when it came out, when people were figuring it out. And some people have been suggesting the idea of like just starting a Discord for people who have never played Fez and just throwing them all in there and just not letting them look anything up. And that, I think some people have been doing that, which sounds pretty cool. But yes, the last thing I wanted to bring up was this game called The Longing, just because it's absurd. This idea of this little guy like under this cave forever, who just, you have to wait 400 days in real life, 400 days, and you just walk around really slowly and do these mundane things. And I don't know what the game is like aside from that, but I think the pitch of it is really it's out there, you know, in a way that I like, in a way that only video games can do something weird like that. And I really appreciate the idea. Not sure I ever want to play it, but yes, I thought that was cool.
That game's also out now.
It is. It's also out now. Yeah, some cool shadow drops coming, some release dates. There's a fucking Konami game in here, Getsu Fumiden, which is based apparently on an old Famicom series, but it's being made by an indie studio. But it's because it's a Konami IP, but it was still in an indie world. It's a mess. Konami continues to be a mess, but hey, that game looks neat. It's got kind of like Japanese art style to it, almost Okami-esque in some ways. I felt, but yeah, that seemed pretty cool.
As Aztec Forgotten Gods.
Yeah, from the studio who made Mulaka.
Is it the same studio? Interesting.
Yeah, right. I didn't play Mulaka. I think that game didn't perform that well, or didn't get that great reviews. No. So,
and I'd be worried about the performance of another third-person action game.
Yes.
But, who knows?
Cool. Well, there was one game that dropped a demo that we have both played, which was Aerial Knights Never Yield, correct?
Yes.
I think that's the name of it. And it's a side-scrolling runner, kind of level-based runner. And we both checked it out. Bally, what did you think of this game? Because it was definitely one of those that caught your attention, I think, during the presentation.
Yeah, it kind of looked really cool in the direct, and I was like, right, okay, try the demo. I was like, I've got to try the demo. I want to see what this game's like. And when you compare it to like Bit Trip Runner, which is maybe an unfair comparison, it just goes against all the things I like about Bit Trip Runner. For example, when you meet an obstacle, the game will actually slow down and give you like a window to put in the input to avoid or jump or go through the obstacle in some way. So it's essentially a pure platformer in that sense, where there's no rhythm related to the music that relates to what you're doing in the game at all, which I found quite jarring, but maybe that's a very unfair comparison because I'm essentially wanting it to be a game that is clearly not.
Yes.
So yeah, it doesn't run overly smoothly on Switch. It looks fine. And I like the idea of like just levels based on like in this world. It's like a cool, nice looking world, but like it wasn't doing a ton for me personally. I don't know.
I think there's a couple of things. When they start you off, the base difficulty is way too generous with the time windows. Like it slows down time too much to a degree where I was like, okay, waiting. Now I can do the jump over. Like I think turning it up to the kind of harder difficulty definitely helped with my enjoyment of it, because it was much more like reaction. Like
does it reduce the actual slowdown window?
Yes, it reduces it quite significantly, actually, to the point where the game was much more playable and more interesting to me. But I do think that there is a little bit of lag input when you input your control, and a bit of clipping as well, when you're kind of jumping over things and sliding. And
because it's like these 3D objects in a 2D set on a 2D plane.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Your feet and stuff are clipping through things, and it's not overly precise.
No,
you just feel like Bit Trip Runner is so precise about everything.
And that's the thing, I think, is like I like the vibe of it. I like the setting and everything like that. The music's really cool, but the control leaves something to be desired in terms of its input and like how accurate it is and the way in which it feels. And because it's using the analog stick, and I tried using the D-pad and it actually felt better using the analog stick, it didn't quite...
Wait, can you say that again?
In this case, Bally, the analog stick worked better, just because when I was pressing the D-pad, you can't tap the D-pad, you have to hold it down, and that felt unnatural to me.
Good. Yeah.
So that's why I was using the analog stick, because you're like holding it to the side anyway. And I think ultimately the level design was kind of boring and not that... There wasn't much variety, right? You've got your 4 moves of your jump, backflip, slide. I think that maybe there's a 4th one, I can't remember. But all the obstacles they give to you, or there's a forward dash, actually. The forward dash is like, because there's a timer on the screen, and so you can do it faster in the level if you're dashing the whole way through.
Right.
So there is a little bit of adding your own difficulty there with the dash. But ultimately, the level design itself was very bland and didn't really show off much interesting. And they give you like 3 levels to try. I think level 1, 2, and 5 is what you have. And even the later part of the game wasn't that much different to what I had played before, and I was a little bit underwhelmed by it. I think it definitely has a great vibe to it and a great look. Doesn't run amazingly on Switch. Frame rate is a little chunky here and there, but it from a game design perspective, I just don't think it's quite there yet. And I think it's coming out relatively soon, so I'm not sure this is a case of them having time to like go back to the drawing board a bit and change it. Maybe later on it does get better and it does get more interesting and more complicated, but to me it's not quite landing at the moment, which is unfortunate because I really like the look of it. But oh well, that's why demos are helpful sometimes, to make you realize, no, I probably won't check this out. So there you go. Aerial Knights Never Yield. We have lots of video games to talk about, Bally. One of them I'm going to bring up is Toree 3D, which is a game that I saw on Twitter. Dan, who we had on the show recently, tweeted out, hey, there's this platformer I played on Switch, it's 89p. And I was like, okay. He seemed to like it. And I know he's very into 3D platformers, so anything
can't
that
go wrong
has
with
his
89p. Come on.
Absolutely. And anything with his stamp of approval, I was like, yeah, I'll check it out. So I downloaded it, and it's neat. It's like maybe 40 minutes long if you dash through it. There's like 9 or 8 levels, and it has a system of you can collect stars as you go through. You play as this kind of little duck character, and it's a 3D platformer in the sense of, I wouldn't compare it to like a Banjo-Kazooie or something. This is far more like a, I guess, Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, maybe that's a bad comparison
3D
as
world,
well.
3D land.
3D land, yeah. It's more like an isometric perspective, but the levels are very linear. And it is behind the back camera, and you are kind of running around this little duck character. Chicken, I don't know what he is, to be honest with you. I look at it and I'm like, is that a duck? Is that a chicken? He's yellow, he's got a beak, he's wearing sunglasses.
There must be some relation to like chickens in the game Toree, because
maybe
surely a Toree maybe is some sort of Japanese creature in some way.
I didn't actually make that connection, but that is interesting. Yeah, I don't know if that has any link or what. I thought it was just a random word.
Is there any link at all? Because the idea that Toree is 2D and this is Toree 3D. It's like a play on words. Was there ever a Toree 2D?
Well, they're spelt differently. So Toree is spelled Tori, and this is Torree or Toree. I'm not sure how you spell it. Anyway, it's neat. It is very much PS1 aesthetic, which is an interesting, like, specific thing to talk about, because I feel like there is obviously games of that era, coming out N64, PlayStation, had a similar polygonal style, but there is a specific kind of PS1 way in which things are rendered that I think this game kind of nails and definitely goes for. I've heard people say it kind of has a bit of a DS aesthetic as well, and I kind of see where that's coming from, but I would say it's a bit more PS1 inspired. Apparently this was a kind of like part of this whole PS1 demos thing that happened a while ago, and then it was made into a full game, which is a neat thing. And yeah, you go around, you collect the stars. The stars are 2D sprites on the screen as well, which lends it to that kind of N64 PS1 aesthetic of having sprites alongside the polygonal worlds that you're inhabiting and collecting those. And it's not very complicated. The level design, again, not very interesting, but it took me 40 minutes to go through. It was a fun time. You have a run, you get a double jump, and his movement is a little chunky. He's a little tubby little chicken guy, right? So he's not the most nimble and agile in the world, and so you are kind of like hopping on platforms waiting for them to move. There's a level where there's a bunch of cars you're on top of and they're moving towards you, and you're jumping from car to car. So it has some ideas here and there. There's like snow levels where you're sliding down ramps, but yeah, there's not much, I'd say, exploring to find those stars. The stars, for the most part, are exactly on the linear path that you're taking, and there's one instance I can remember of having to go behind a thing to find stars, but aside from that, it's not going to tap into that exploration style if you're looking for that from a 3D platform. But again, this is 89p, took me 40 minutes to play, has a nice aesthetic to it, controls decently. I don't think it's anything special, but that's the thing, right? Like, it costs like next to nothing, so it doesn't have to be. And I think the difference between something like Aerial Knights and this, in terms of my expectations, are much higher for something like that, because the way it's shown in a Nintendo Direct, the way that it's going to cost like 12 or 13 quid probably when it comes out, even though that game is probably better than Toree 3D, all things considered, I probably would be like, yeah, go buy Toree 3D because it's like 89p and this is small developer who's just put it out on the eShop. And it's really rare, I think, to find stuff on the eShop that is that bucket basement price that isn't just complete shit, right? Like, it is most stuff that is that price on Switch is just garbage trash, and this isn't. Like, it's not an amazing game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a fun little 3D romp that I think people will enjoy if they want to check it out. What I will say is it gave me a little bit of motion sickness, just because the camera is a bit weird. I think the camera is inverted in one way, either up or down or left or right, that I had to get used to, and there's no option to change it, which is a little frustrating. But yeah, I don't know. It's 89p, man. Fucking knock yourself out. You probably have enough fucking gold points.
There's not enough 3D platformers. We need more games like this, It's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Toree 3D, it's neat. Check it out. Bally, you played a game that I've been telling you to play for ages.
The list of games that MBZ tells Bally he should play is getting smaller by the day.
It always is. It's slowed down in recent times, but it's definitely we're edging towards a.
It's now a little pile. It's a little pile, like 2-3 games now. It used to be like a big stack of 40 games.
I need to start adding to the pile again, Bally. It's okay. It's okay, Bally. I have like 19 Yakuza games for you to play now, so it's okay. We're filling it up.
I'm going to get to Yakuza 0. That's the plan.
I remember showing you Mark of the Ninja on my PC when you came round to my house back in 2012 or whatever, and being...
Which is when this game came out.
Yeah, and being like, Bally, this game is fucking awesome, and like showing it to you, and you being like, yeah, okay, that looks cool. You weren't even playing indie games at that time. You were like, the one indie game I played is like Trine 2. That was your indie game experience. And I was like, this game fucking rules, and you were like, yeah, okay. Fast forward fucking 19 years or however long it's been, and you finally got around to actually playing Mark of the Ninja.
Yeah, it came to Switch in 2019. And yeah, it's, for those who don't know, it's an incredible 2D stealth game. And, you know, I love Metroidvanias, but it is still refreshing to play a level-based stage, but still has a little bit of Metroidvania non-linearity to it, which I think is like a really nice setting. I think, you know, the plot is all around like ninjas and getting revenge and backstabbing and this sort of thing. And I must admit, the story kind of went over my head by the end. There's a lot of like twists and turns. And when I read it on the Wikipedia page afterwards, I was like, really? That's what was going on? I had no idea. So maybe I could have paid more attention to the cutscenes, which are lovely, lovely animated cutscenes.
Clay has this house art style that I think is just gorgeous, and you know, carries through it. Like Grifflands is a new game that they're coming out with soon. It's currently in early access, but has that signature Clay look to it. I think that the only game of theirs that doesn't have that is Don't Starve, and that game looks totally different from other games they have made. But yeah, like Shank and Mark of the Ninja and Invisible Ink all look amazing.
And I'll admit, I've really played very few like stealth games at all.
There's not many out there, to be honest with you. You know, like pure stealth
I've
games.
played a lot of, you know, third-person games, and almost all third-person games have some elements of stealth these days, especially open-world games. And obviously played stuff like The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, and, you know, we've just played Batman Arkham Asylum, which has plenty of stealth in it, but I've never really played 2D stealth, apart from a little bit of Zero Mission, where you're playing in like the Zero suit at the end of that game.
Yeah, which I wouldn't really classify as a great stealth.
No, that's more just get spotted and run like hell, which is slightly different. But that's an aspect of stealth. But I think this game is just perfectly formulated around the concept of stealth. And initially I felt the controls were very sticky, but then you kind of realize that's kind of what they're going for. And sure, it can be a little finicky at times to get from like one wall to another, but it's better that than falling to your death and being spotted, essentially. So like they take a bit of getting used to, but by the middle of the game, like you've got your shurikens and you've got like these other traps you can set and spears you can throw, and you know, all sorts of items that you can use, and you feel like you've got a full array of like options, which is really cool. And I think that the level of difficulty is set just right, honestly. Like it's a pretty challenging game, and yes, you will die most of the time when you're spotted, but I find if you plan your escape route when you get spotted, you can actually get away, not fairly easily, but more consistently. It's when you get spotted without intending to get spotted that I think you're most vulnerable, and you will easily get killed often. And I think it's a really good game in the sense that, yes, if you plan your route, you can actually survive lots of things, and the game does a good job of mixing up escape sequences, and there's new types of guards, and there's stuff like gas rising that you have to start avoiding, and they introduce stuff like guard dogs which will sniff you out, and you know, introducing guard dogs like 10 years before Last of Us Part 2 was like, hey, we can put in guard dogs, which is fun. And yeah, there's some like enemies that you can't kill by the end, which are nice. It's always good to have like brutes that you just purely have to avoid. And yeah, it's just a phenomenal game. I could not believe this game was from 2012, honestly. It's like one of those top tier indie games that you just think must have been, well, I guess it is one of the best early indie video games by a mile.
Oh, for sure. It's the quality of the animation on display is what stands out to me, because I, you know, while you're playing this, I went back and watched some footage of it, and I was like, damn, dude, like the way that he wraps up guards, or like stabs guards, or like hides them and their bodies, and like slides behind walls, and the slinking nature of his movement, his feet, you know, flicking to turn off light switches. The thing that I really love about this game is the creativity and the openness with which you can approach situations, right? Like the ability to take on everything non-lethally, in terms of you can just not interact with any of these people, just slink past them and not have any deaths on your count.
And you get points for it. Like, I like it's all points based. There's no live system, which is great, especially for a 2012 game.
Yes.
And yeah, I think there's points you can get if you don't kill anyone, and there's points you also get if you don't get spotted by anyone. You will still get points for killing people. It's just you can get a bigger point bonus by not killing anyone. And killing someone is not just a case of getting behind them and pressing a button. There's like a little QTE you have to do it, and there's a little bit of timing involved. So sure, you're going to get it. Once you learn the timing of it, you'll get it right 99% of the time, but there's still that 1% where you'll just mess it up, and as a result, you'll do a loud death. Like, they will scream as they're dying, and that obviously alerts all the nearby guards. Like, the game does a really good job of merging that really nice animated art style with a really good video game language of these are the areas that are lit. This is the area that is creating sound, and it does that through like shading and blacks and whites. But on top of that, it's like these rings that go and radiuses that go around characters and things that just make it so clear as to, if you're hiding behind this plant pot, you cannot be spotted. Your character has gone completely dark. And then likewise, if you're in the light, they like go completely light. And it's very clear about that in terms of, take out this light and then the enemy can't see you and you can just walk right up to them and kill them, kind of thing. And like, that's exactly what you want for what the game's asking you to do in a stealth setting.
100%. That is, I think, one of the most important things about Mark of the Ninja is the level and degree of information it affords the player. And that, what you're talking about sound there is so important because it visualizes sound in a way that I have never seen any other game do. And it is so fucking impressive and yet so simple, right? It's like this radius circle that goes out when you have alerted a guard or whatever and they have made noise, it will burst out. And if that intersects with someone else, they will have counted as hearing it and therefore they will come and check out what is going on. And it is, damn, what an incredibly clever way to do things.
And it's so good because a lot of the third-person games, and we've just played Batman, you've got like an X-ray vision. And sure, that X-ray vision is great for stealth because it's like telling you exactly where the enemies are and all the corridors and this and the other. But it really takes you out of the atmosphere because it's turning the whole game world into the nuts and bolts of how the level is put together. The fact that this game doesn't just give you like an X-ray vision to see through the things is really nice, because it keeps you in the, not cinematic, but it keeps you in the mood, the style, the vibe of the game, that what it's going for. And I think it's too easy for games to just say, oh, we need you to get to this point, therefore, here's a clear thing that completely goes against all the natural colors of the world we've created and just creates a black and white box for you to visualize where you need to go. And I think that Mark and Ninja does a great job of merging the two together, where you still feel like it's a very atmospheric world, while at the same time it's very clear who the visual language of what they're telling you between sounds and light and dark is so clear.
Totally. And I know that you get like other gadgets and things as you go through. That I remember using the shuriken a lot to alert people or like take out lights by like throwing it at them. Did you use much of the things in your arsenal, or were you kind of leaning on the familiar stuff? I think there's smoke bombs and stuff like that, right? Yeah,
there's smoke bombs where you can definitely cheese quite a lot of the kind of puzzles that involve lasers and things like that. So I was using those a little bit. I really did like the traps. So it's like just like a spring-loaded trap that will kill an enemy when they walk into it. They're quite useful. And yeah, I really kind of crushed on those ones, I feel. Obviously, I use the shuriken a lot. I think the game does a better job of encouraging you to take out lights earlier on, and then I definitely forgot about it a bit too often later on when it probably would have helped at times.
Right.
And yeah, the game, it kind of like hand holds you with like, this is an item, this is how you can use the item, and then from that point it's very much sandboxy, kind of you can do what you want later in the game. And the game is very lean, like it's only like an 8-hour campaign, and for the intricate design that they've put into the systems of everything, it's really good that they made the game so small and lean, rather than just saying, here's a whole level based around this one item, and now here's another whole level based around this other new item. And they really don't do that. They just create a short, condensed, small level. I think there's like 13 levels, and each level is maybe half an hour, 20 minutes long. It's like a really good balance.
Yeah, and it depends like how much time you're taking being stealthy, or if you're going loud. And it's the other thing that I really appreciate about stealth games, and my least favorite thing about stealth in video games is the idea you get spotted, it's an auto fail state, and you have to redo the section again. It sucks, right?
Yeah.
But games like this and Metal Gear Solid 5 give you the tools with which to fuck up, but then get away and hide again and reset things and try again, essentially, within the same space. And I think that's so important.
There's a lot of ventilation shafts and things like that are connected to... you've got like a grappling hook, and if you do it right, you can be spotted, grapple into the ventilation shaft, and if you're in the dark and the enemy has no ability to get to that point, you just have to wait it out and you're absolutely fine. Like it's kind of old video gamey in that sense. It's like the enemy can't see me, therefore I am safe until they forget about me entirely, kind of thing. But that kind of works for what this game is going for. If the enemies were overly intelligent, I'm not sure it would work in a 2D setting quite as well.
Totally, because like the entire premise of it is the systems are clear and obvious to you so that you can understand them and therefore utilize them in a way that best suits your playstyle, right?
Yeah.
And so having predictable behaviors, or at least not predictable necessarily, but you know that this will cause one thing will cause another thing to happen, right? And that's just from the clarity of the vision cones of the enemy to the sound things to all the elements. I think this game is just remarkable, and I haven't played it in a very long time, and I know this is the remastered version on Switch that you played, and I don't know if there's anything they added or changed for that, or visual upgrades, or
I believe there's like a DLC level that I didn't play.
Okay.
And I believe they like touched up the cutscenes, was my understanding, but I've not looked into it beyond those two aspects.
This is one of those games where, like, man, Clay do such interesting and different stuff as a studio, but I'd love them to do a sequel to Mark of the Ninja one day.
Are you into any of their other games?
I played Shank. I talked about Shank on the show a while ago.
And we're a bit like resistant to the idea of Don't Starve, aren't we? It's kind of
I feel like Don't Starve together. Maybe we could try out at some point.
Because I know they did lots of expansions for that game, and that video you showed me with No Clip, right? So.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, but I think that like I would want to check out Invisible Ink, like Austin Walker's Invisible Ink, game that he got into Giant Bomb's Game of the Year list, and I'm very interested in Grifflands because as someone who as you know, very into roguelike card-based deck builders at this point in my life. That game looks like it's doing something different with that idea. It's currently in early access. I'll wait for the full release, and it will be on Switch when it full releases. But I feel like that game is going to review very well. Another thing that Austin Walker has talked about a bunch that I check out. So Clay, very cool studio.
All very different games, but a similar art style, which is cool for a studio.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'd love a sequel to this game. You're right. I'm a little surprised they haven't at this point. But we'll see. Anyway, what else have you been playing, MBZ?
I have been playing as a Cloud, Bally. I'm Cloud 9, going around little Cloud, causing chaos. I've been playing a little game called Rain on Your Parade, which came out.
It looks a little like Donut County, only you're playing as a Cloud this time.
A little bit. I would actually say it has a bit more depth than something like Donut County does. The idea is you're this cloud, you float around, and you cause chaos for people by raining on them. It's called Rain on Your Parade. And it is, I would say...
Someone planning a potentially outdoor wedding, it does make me feel a little edgy.
Yes, indeed. I feel like there is a wedding that you ruin at some point.
The wedding's in the trailer when I looked at
okay,
yes.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah. One of the early levels, I think. But it's kind of a puzzle game, I would say, in some senses, where it's level by level and you have an overworld map, and it's funny because on the menu you have to rain on the buttons in order to do so. Like when you're starting the game, you rain on the start button, and then when you're closing the game down, instead of clicking quit on the menu, you have to rain on the quit button and the game just closes. I'm just like, okay, that's very funny. But you have different powers as you go through, and so you get lightning, and so you can like scare people with lightning. You start getting snow, and you can rain that down and turn people into snowballs and roll them around the place. There's a lot of physics going on here, so people and objects like bumping into each other and falling off cliffs and that type of stuff. And it uses all these ideas in like a way that I find quite satisfying, because you never stick with something for too long, right? And I think the tricky part of a game like this is a couple of hours long. It could get bogged down in, okay, I'm just raining on more people. What's the objective here? The objective is to rain on 10 people. I've done this a million times. But it really changes things up enough of like, okay, you go into this school and you have a couple of different objectives. Some of them are necessary to finish the level. Some of them are optional ones. And so one of them is like, get all the school children out of this classroom down the corridor through this door. And so you're like raining on them, like kiting them through, like moving them through the corridor. Another one is explode the chemistry set. And as the cloud, you can hover over different objects and it will fill you up with different types of stuff. So at one point you can get oil and then you spray oil on the ground instead of rain. And then you try and like link that oil to fire and the oil sets on fire from the fire and that blows things up. Kind of similar in that way. So like blowing up the chemistry set involves getting the green liquid and the blue liquid, mixing them together, and boom, it explodes it. And so every level has that kind of twist to it of there are different objectives that you are doing, and they riff on things quite nicely. I'd say the writing is quite self-aware and a little bit over the top at some points of like, there's no microtransactions in this game, and things like that, and kind of breaking the fourth wall with those types of things, which I'm like, okay, I feel like we're kind of past that in a sense of that type of writing, but it has interesting reference points to other games. There's a whole level, which most of these levels, to be honest with you, take like maybe 20 to 30 seconds. Some of them longer than that, some of them a couple of minutes. But there's this one level that you go into, and it literally is like a full-blown RPG where you go into a town, start talking to people, and then you like, oh, help herd these sheep. And I'm like, are we playing a Zelda game? And then you come back to the town, it's on fire. You go into a cave, do a dungeon, like you do a full-on Zelda dungeon as this cloud. And it's really fun and super unique because it's not what you expect, I think, from this game. It's like, oh, it's a game where you rain on people and you maybe do some puzzles with that. But they have a level where it's like a horror game and you're the cloud as the monster, like going behind people, sneaking up against them. There's a level where you're Metal Gear Soliding, like sneaking through areas. Like they riff on things quite a bit in terms of the reference points, and I think what that serves to do is make it fresh and continue to deliver new ideas while never kind of getting bogged down in anything. And I think it's super neat. I don't think it's like special mechanically because a lot of these things you do you're just gonna figure out what you have to do, and the actual act of doing it is not necessarily that interesting, but seeing the chain reaction, sometimes seeing the ways in which objects like move around and get thrown about. There's a level that's a bit more complicated where you're in a TV studio, and the objectives are roll the weatherman down the stairs, turn the camera to the green screen, and then present the news. So you have to like get to the weatherman, snow on him, and he's far away from the entrance, and you have to roll him as a ball by using the snow as like a kind of sliding platform to get him out of the way, and he rolls down the stairs. And then you go into the control room and like use the lightning zap on the control panel to change the camera angle so that it's shooting at the green screen, and then you as the cloud just pop in front of the screen and it cuts to a vision of the cloud presenting the news. And you never really see anything like that again in the game. Like this one setting, this one set of little objectives you do, and it's done. And it's really cool. So yeah, I would say check it out. It's on Switch. It's on Game Pass. It's all over the place. Don't rain on my parade. On your parade, sorry. Or rain on... No. Don't Rain on My Parade is a song, I think. Anyway, I keep getting the name of this game wrong.
Just Rain on Your Parade.
It's Rain on Your Parade, and you play as a cloud.
Switch and PC and Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, and aesthetically it's nice. The cloud is kind of cardboard. He's like made out of cardboard. Also, the other fun thing is near the beginning of the game, you get to draw a face on the cloud, and then that face you can keep throughout the rest of the game. So
of course,
I drew a little face with a tongue out. I gave him a top hat. There are hats in the game you can give. That's where the microtransaction joke comes in, I think, with like, we have hats and you can get this hat for $4.99. They're like, just kidding, no microtransactions in this game. But yes, Rain on Your Parade. Neat
nice
little game that I think people might enjoy.
I'll play it later this year.
Yeah, check it out. Last thing I want to check in with is a game that I think is one of my favorites I've played this year, and I think everyone on Switch should go and download Touhou Lunar Nights, because that's the other game the studio has made. I talked about that last year as one of my favorites.
And this game's not on Switch yet.
No. So I'm talking about Record of Lodoss War Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth.
Catchy.
Very.
Catchy name.
I'm just bringing games with the most memorable names today, Everyone will know Toree 3D, Rain on Your Parade, and Record of Lodoss War Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth. So, Team Ladybug. I don't know if I've done a whole diatribe on Team Ladybug here, but They are a studio who made a kind of parody game for Shin Megami Tensei that was actually in Metroidvania that you could play through your browser back in the day. A few years ago, I think it was tied in with some Atlas thing going on. And there was a thread on Reset Era a few years ago, which was like, Team Ladybug are making the best Metroidvanias and no one is talking about them. And I was like, okay, I like Metroidvanias. Let me see what's going on here. And this thread included Touhou Lunar Nights and Record of Lodoss War, and showed a bunch of like GIFs and screenshots from these games, and I was like, oh shit, dude, these look really cool. They are pixel art Metroidvanias based on anime / weird Japanese niche IP that nobody has ever heard of, at least I certainly hadn't, and they just make Metroidvania games from them. And Touhou Lunar Nights is an excellent game. It is on Switch now, people can check it out. It is like it twists the Metroid formula in the sense of it has a lot of bullet hell elements, and there's a mechanic of grazing objects and enemies and like collecting up mana by doing that and getting close to enemies but while not hitting them. It's a really, really cool twist on the genre while being very traditional in other ways. Both these games tend to lean more on the Castlevania end of things in terms of you're exploring and killing enemies a lot, and you are also leveling up a bunch, and you're equipping weapons and that type of thing. So it's maybe not as much in your taste, Bally, but what I will say is these games feel a lot better, less stiff and less kind of unwieldy.
Right. Well, Touhou is on the Xbox Game Pass, so might
yes, it
go
is
at some point.
Yeah, but Record of Lodoss War is, I think, a step up from Touhou Lunar Nights even. Overall, I think that it is easier. And I think that maybe lends to my taste a little bit, because frankly, the final boss of Touhou Lunar Nights is one of the hardest bosses I've ever beaten in a video game. And I enjoyed it. It was great fun doing, but my God, that was very difficult. This game, much easier in that sense, but it looks incredible. The pixel art on display in this game is just so gorgeous, and I remember seeing a GIF of it early on of the double jump, and I am here to claim this is the best double jump in a video game, Bally. It's maybe my favorite double jump.
Big claim.
Because the animation, the way in which your character spins through the air, and the height of it, the movement of it.
Clarification, is that not a spin jump?
No, it's a double jump because you'd hit it twice. It's just the animation had a flourish of spinning to it. I'm not gonna look, Mario Sunshine, eat your heart out is what
we
I'll
go
say.
with the Smash Brothers logic of jumps where it's double jump and then spin jump, right?
No, I don't call a Smash Brothers jump a spin. That's like an up B, right? An up B is not a spin jump.
But many characters up Bs are spin jumps. That's what I mean. Like you got your double jump, but regardless of whether it's a spin jump or an up B, it's not the second jump. It's not the double jump.
It's the third jump.
It's the third jump.
Triple jump. Ori has a triple jump. Ori has an infinite jump at some point in time. Anyway, yes. It's what I'm saying is, like, my God, I love the way this game looks. And aside from the kind of, I think both these games, like exploration-wise and linearity-wise, they're very linear. They are much more in the fusion vein, which again is kind of to my taste. But like your upgrades and stuff are not that different from what you would usually find in one of these games. You get a slide which lets you go under small areas, and you get a double jump which lets you get to higher areas. You know that you can breathe underwater. It's your traditional, like, very basic tool set. The way in which these games set themselves apart is their unique mechanics, and so this game has this kind of elemental thing going on where you have a wind spirit and a fire spirit, and you can switch between these whenever you want. And what happens is you will fight certain bosses, or you'll come across certain enemies where only one of those will work on them. So one of them, won't do any damage, but the other one will. Or there's going to be a kind of bar of fire that you can pass through if you have the fire spirit, but you can't if you're the wind, and vice versa. And so you're constantly switching between these two elements. The fire one, does more damage, adds a bit more elements to your attacks, and the wind one allows you to hover in the air and like do like longer jumps where you can stay floating. So it's the platforming elements alongside the kind of combat elements that are fusing these two parts. But where it really comes to bear is in the boss fight. There's one early boss fight where these two genies, this wind spirit and this fire spirit, and it is kind of like bullet hell of them just throwing shit at you. However, if you are fire and the fire thing is throwing fire at you, it does no damage, and in fact you will use it to drain energy from it, and that drained energy you can then use in other attacks to do a bunch more damage. And so you're switching between, and so it is similar in some ways to Touhou Lunar Nights, maybe a little bit more simplified, a bit more pared back. a lot easier to understand, but it's super satisfying to like switch between these. It's like fire, wind, you're playing blink, like switching between them on the fly. And you also build up this meter of like, if you're attacking with the wind, you can build up your fire meter to maximum, and when you switch over to it, if either of these gears are at maximum, you will start to heal yourself automatically, and so your healing will keep just pumping in. If you get hit, you'll get knocked down to the next level and the healing will stop, and so it's always in your best interest to have like one of your bars at maximum so that you can switch over to it if you've taken a bunch of damage, and you'll just start healing yourself. So really fast paced. Again, the movement kind of Castlevania in some ways, but definitely a lot more freeing and light, and the way the weapons move through the air, really satisfying. You have a bow and arrow that you use for some puzzles, and you can ricochet the arrow off of platforms, off of like metallic areas to hit switches and get through areas. And at the end of the day, fundamentally, it's not really that innovative. It's doing the Metroidvania thing for Castlevania style games so incredibly well and so beautifully, and the music is great. I had a great time with it, and I'm pretty sure it will come to Switch later, because Toho Luna Nights did, but I played it on Steam, and I got it right before it came out of early access, because the reason this was on people's radars is because it has been in early access for a little while, and they finally put it out, added the final 2 areas, and I played through it, and I think it's marvelous. It's one of those comfort food games for me, but like when you do a Metroidvania that is comfort food but also doing something slightly interesting but has every other element that ticks my box, I'm always going to be a sucker for it. So I really love it. If you can remember the name, it is Record of Lodoss War Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth. I apologize on behalf of Team Ladybug. Actually, I apologize on behalf of anime for making titles that are absurd.
Anime has spread across things beyond just anime, and that is very concerning.
I mean, Bally, I'm down with our anime overlords. I will bow down to them. I'm in too deep at this point, so... Anyway, that's it. That's going to close us out for the first segment. Don't get anywhere. We'll be back after the break with a big stonking chat about Paper Mario on the Nintendo 64. Don't go anywhere. You will not want to miss this. See you in a bit. All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. It's time for a big discussion. It's time for our next Backlog Club. I don't remember what number it is. Maybe Bally does, but we've done a lot of them at this point in time.
11 or 12, I want to say.
My goodness, we've done so many of these things. And we are talking about video game Paper Mario on Nintendo 64. It is video game, it is good. And I thought that we would start off by chatting about our history with Paper Mario, our understanding of Paper Mario, what we knew before going in, that type of stuff. So, Barry? Yes, hi Barry, that's your new name. Because we're in, everyone's flat here now. So when we turn into flat people, we flatten our names down. So yes, Flat Bally, Barry, tell me what you know. What did you know about Paper Mario before you got into this series and came into it?
I will say, first of all, this is only our 9th Backlog Club, I think.
Okay, there we go. Clearing it up. Yeah, we need to, I mean, if you want to count all the Mario Celebration of Mario, then we're probably closest to that.
Right,
but,
good point, good point.
Yeah.
I've never played any Paper Mario. I've never played any Mario RPG. We've obviously both not played the Super Nintendo Mario RPG either. So my experience of anything Mario and RPG related is basically non-existent. And my only knowledge of Paper Mario is that people are very tribal about the early games versus the late games. And everyone says, oh, the early games have RPG mechanics and they're so much better than the recent games that have taken a lot of those mechanics out, and everyone should play the early games, and that they have a lot of great writing throughout the series. And that's basically about all I knew. And you obviously played Origami King last year, and that's So I know your opinions on kind of like some of the later Paper Marios, and our good friend Ali T was a big fan of the Wii game.
Well,
so...
I wouldn't say he was a big fan. He enjoyed that game, but the issue was he got to a point where
it hung up, didn't it?
Yeah, his Wii disc had an issue or something to do with the read-write process on his Wii, where he got to one point in the game where it just hung, and obviously you couldn't patch games back in the Wii days. You know, the one attempt they did was the Skyward Sword channel you would download to like patch your game. Something you actually had to send your version of like Metroid Prime 3 or something into Nintendo for them to like fix it, and then, or send your Wii, I think, send your entire fucking console for Nintendo to fix a fucking bug so that you could get your progression going again, which is absurd. But yes, he basically got partway through the game, halfway through it, and could never get past it again, and he was bummed out by that. And I think he returned the game after that as a result.
Yeah, he was quite into that back then. So yeah, I've very little reference for Paper Mario, and considering how much of a Nintendo fan I am, it's one of my blind spots. So good to have played it.
Yeah, totally. I have a little bit more experience. I obviously, as we talk about all the time, I had days of watching Let's Plays non-stop, and therefore a lot of my Nintendo knowledge and history for games I haven't played comes from the fact that I watched Nintendo Capri-Sun play through like every game under the sun. Wouldn't recommend watching anyone play Donkey Kong 64, but I did that, and now I know. So yes, I had knowledge of both the first game and the second game through watching playthroughs of them back in the day, but it was a long, long time ago. In fact, I think the Let's Play that I watched for the original Paper Mario was not from Nintendo Capri-Sun. It's from a guy called Batman9502, which if you have been around the Let's Playing scene for a while will know that he was probably the first big LPer I found, actually. He did a Twilight Princess playthrough that was really good, and you know, that was kind of the era when I was looking on the internet of like, yes, Zelda, that's what I like, so I'm looking up playthroughs of those types of games. But he has a really good playthrough of that, still holds up, I think, and I went back and was referencing it for like, how far am I through the game based on his playlist of it, which was kind of fun. And so I know that much about Paper Mario. The first one I played was Sticker Star, unfortunately, which at the time I kind of enjoyed for what it was, but I understood like it did have its issues, and I certainly know why people despise it so much. A lot of that game, the reason I liked it was fresh to me as an aesthetic, the paper stuff, and it was really nicely presented on 3DS, like really just looked great. But everything else about it was very much left to be desired. Skipped out on Color Splash, and then I played Origami King last year, which I think is really good, and I enjoyed it a lot outside of, again, as we've mentioned, the battle system not being something that I really want to engage with that much. So it's interesting because I think, you know, we are, with that game, getting back to a lot of what this game did in the beginning, and I think the only real thing you're missing with Origami King is the RPG stuff and those mechanics, because the rest of it, and I would say actually in many sense, and we'll get into this game does a much better job of setting tone and place and a world than I think those other games do, and the places you go in them feel a bit more theme parky versus the way in which this game feels like a bit more grounded, in a weird way to say grounded in a Mario game, but like it feels like these places are connected and there is a world here, right? So yeah, that's kind of my experience with the series, and I've also played Mario RPGs in the past on the Mario and Luigi games. So I've played the second one, which is Partners in Time on DS. I've played the fourth one, Dream Team, or if you live in Europe, Dream Team Bros, because that's apparently the localization they wanted to go with, which I was not a big fan of. And I have attempted to start Superstar Saga maybe 19 different times in my life, and have never got further than like 2 hours in because of various reasons. Tried to do a Let's Play of it one time, never did. Like, tried that 3 times.
You included it in the vote, right?
You included it in the vote. It could have been voted on. And yeah. And the other one, obviously the original Mario RPG, I've also watched a playthrough of the original Mario RPG. So I have a good working knowledge of this genre, shall we say, this particular subset.
So most of this LP watching was a decade ago.
Yeah, a lot of it was, yeah. So much of my memory and much of things that happened in this game had pretty much evaporated. It's this weird thing when you play a video game, it will stick with you much more than when you watch it for whatever reason, just because you are engaging with it directly. And so I'm sure that in 10 years' time, I will remember the characters far more than I do now. I did before starting this from my previous watching of the game, if that makes any sense. Which whatever. So yes, that's kind of where we are in terms of going into this game. Neither of us have played the series darling, Thousand Year Door, which everyone talks about as the second coming of Christ. But yeah, I'm sure that, I mean, having played this, I probably will want to play that game, or hope that Nintendo re-releases it at some point in the future on a console of their choosing.
That's the GameCube one.
Is the GameCube one,
right,
yes.
Right.
So yeah, Paper Mario, this is an interesting series, an interesting game. Obviously, Square Enix actually made Mario RPG on Super Nintendo. So this was actually first time an internal Nintendo studio with Intelligent Systems worked on a Mario RPG. And so it definitely, to me, from having seen some of Mario RPG, and of course we're actually going to do another Backlog Club on that game later this year, because both of these tied in our poll, but that game seems far more traditional as an RPG versus this, where it feels like it pares things back a bit. It's a bit more simplified, and as a result a bit more approachable, I would say, overall. And it's interesting that the game supposedly was going to be called Super Mario RPG 2, and it was going to be released on the 64DD, but it wasn't. It was scrapped for that, and then was built for the N64 instead. And then the main game's art designer, Naoki Aoyama, he was credited with coming up with a flat design for the characters, which it kind of works really well because it allows them on the N64, when you think about this new system, 3D, all this stuff, and you think about building a big RPG and these big worlds with all these characters, doing polygonal versions of all of those, probably quite a task, right? And so the idea that you have these flat characters that honestly are basically just sprites that you can rip wholesale. Obviously it's probably not what they did, but it's like a Super Nintendo game in a sense. You are creating these kind of 2D people within this 3D space. It probably resource-wise made a lot of sense, and probably explains why the game has such a wide variety of characters and such a huge number of places you go to, because I don't know if they would have achieved it otherwise.
And there's still like a 22 hour JRPG. Like, it would have been very difficult to have that scope for something that was properly 3D.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where we're coming from with this game. I'm also going to go to a couple of comments that we got about people who also started this game and gave a few comments about getting into it. Acerbis said, I played the Thousand Year Door 3 years ago and adored it, and I came into this game expecting it to be a much more primitive version of that game, but honestly it is way closer to Thousand Year Door in pretty much every aspect that I could possibly imagine. Visually it holds up incredibly well, especially for an N64 game. Making all the characters flat instead of polygonal was some incredible foresight from Intelligent Systems. In all seriousness though, I have to imagine that is part of the reason Paper Mario exists, because there are so many characters in the game that they decided it would be easier if they were all flat. Obviously we are used to Paper Mario as a franchise today, but in a vacuum it is kind of an insane premise that all the characters are just flat.
It's such a good point. Like, if Paper Mario was being made today, he wouldn't be paper, he'd be 3D. They would do something different. Like, it is a way that it's a relic of the time where, as we've said, it worked for N64 to, not have to make 3D polygonal characters. And then because people are like, the paper idea is so great, they've continued that throughout the series. Like, it's kind of weird to think about in that sense.
Yeah, and as a jumping off point as well, I would say maybe Yoshi's Story is another game you could kind of drag into this idea, but Nintendo, as we know in recent decade, I would say, have very much been about, like, let's do weird art styles for some of our games, right? We've got Canvas Curse going into Rainbow Curse with its claymation style. We've had Woolly World with the arts and crafts going on and all that type of stuff. And Epic Yarn obviously was one of those, but Paper Mario, when you think about it, maybe really was the genesis of this idea that Nintendo were like, oh, what if we just try these weird in real life type of ideas that we can then put into video games to differentiate what our video games look like in the market.
I'd go a little further back in that and I think this is really clear on the chapter select screen, where it's like a stage, and it's like this 2D stage, and obviously Mario Bros 3 was the first game to kind of have like this stage look to it, so it kind of like emulates that as well. As much as I agree with you, like, this is the first game that does anything paper craft related.
Right, totally. Yeah, so they have been playing with those ideas for a long time, and then Yoshi's Story is another example of kind of I would say, crayon-y art style, like with its backgrounds. And
Yoshi's Island's quite crayon-y as well.
yeah, totally. Yeah, there's definitely that kind of child drawing type of idea, which crops up a little bit in this game in one of the areas, which we'll get to, I'm sure. We also have a comment from Rachel from Kent, who said, "Hi, MBZ and Bally. I've not yet finished Paper Mario, having only just got to the start of Chapter 6, but thought I'd give you some thoughts of what I've played. For background, this and Thousand Year Door are the only Paper Mario games I've not played, a statement that would likely evoke outrage amongst fans of the series. I've played nearly all of the Mario and Luigi series. Aside from maybe Bowser's Inside Story, what I've played of Paper Mario has easily made it my favourite of the Mario RPGs I've played thus far. I'd also note I'm here way more for all it being a Mario game than an RPG. The only other RPGs I really have experience with are all the Pokemon games. Because of that, I love this game far more because of what it does with the Mario universe than its RPG mechanics, but the fact I'm enjoying those two speak to their quality. Without meaning to come out in sympathy with Bally, I love how this game is actually pretty vanilla Mario. A lot of the areas and enemies are all too familiar, but in many cases with a twist to keep it interesting. And I wouldn't necessarily say it is that vanilla. I would say it starts a bit vanilla, but some of the areas you go to, of course, the Yoshis are a staple, but this island of Yoshis with some weird like looking ones as well as the small ones, and it's a lava island, a tropical island. I would say that it kind of takes some of those familiar characters, but it does place them in locations that we haven't really seen before.
Yeah, and like I think the Mario series generally is a little bit guilty of, here's the frost level, here's the desert level, here's, you know, the tropical level. But I agree with you. I think it does put a bit of a twist on all of those tropes. You know, here's the haunted level, like haunted mansion level. Like, I do think this game does a good job of saying, like, this isn't just a winter area. This is a fully fleshed out town with a little mini murder mystery, and then you go into this other town with like this little star people living in it, and then there's like a castle. Like, it's not just a frost area, you know, like it's so much more than that.
Yes.
And I think the game does a really good job of, it does a good job of representing Mario in terms of, right, let's take Mario 64 and flesh that out into an RPG world in the form of paper, while at the same time having its own take and its own twist. Like, it does an incredible job of that, honestly.
Yeah, totally. It's lots of different kind of twists on what we might expect, while also keeping lots of familiar things about Mario as a franchise and those types of things, right? Like, you think about the items that you use, and it's like, oh, we're using mushrooms to heal. Like, that logically tracks with what Mario does. But then, you know, you have other things, other items that are a little less familiar and definitely unique to this game in particular. So I think we'll just give our overall impressions off the bat, Bally. Having played this game now, what do you think of it? Has it encouraged you to want to branch out and play some other Mario RPG style games or even other Paper Mario games in the series?
Yeah, definitely. I was very keen to play this as my first Paper Mario game because so many people are like, oh, you got to try the original because it's got these RPG mechanics and they're going to be so great. And I was excited about the RPG mechanics and relating this to, you know, a Mario world, the Mushroom Kingdom. Like, and I think it does a fantastic job of that. I love a slow start to a game, but the start of this game is maybe one of the slowest out of RPGs that I can think of.
It's
honestly.
plodding in a way.
It's plodding. So I would have maybe liked a slightly quicker start, but at the same time, I think this game is while it's not baby's first RPG, it is still like trying to be very simplistic, and it's got a very slow build when it's adding mechanics. And I do appreciate that slow build of mechanics in any JRPG, any RPG full stop. Like, I think it does a really good job of that. And it's a really good length. Like, I think I took like 21, 23 hours, and I think that's my ideal length of like an RPG. It's that kind of Chrono Trigger kind of length we've talked about before. And I think that it's just got a really good pacing. We can talk about like Toad Town, how it's like this really great central hub that you constantly come back through. There's optional stuff to do in there, but the 7 areas you're visiting feel really distinct and clear and all have their own personality, and it just feels really fully fleshed out for, like, you know, a 2001 game that is trying to go for this style. And I was very impressed overall. Like, I think it's on the easier side of RPGs, but, you know, I never complain that RPGs are too easy, honestly, because most of them are far too hard. And even this game, I think it's just a trope of RPGs generally that the end of games have to be longer and harder no matter what, and this game stays true to that, which is maybe a little bit of a flaw, but it still wasn't like a a boss that completely kicks your ass like so many other Square Enix or Intelligent Systems bosses that I've faced in the past. So like it's a really great game. I'm very impressed, and I do want to play some more Paper Mario.
Yeah, I think it really holds up as a N64 game, right? We often talk about this era of video games as hard to go back to and difficult to play because of their visuals mostly. And I think Paper Mario gets around that because it isn't a traditional 3D game. Obviously, you know, you have the environments which are like that, but there's this real kind of diorama style to the worlds and the places you go to, and even like the dungeons you go inside. There's kind of a smallness and a tightness to them, and a kind of comfort to them that makes it almost feel like pocket-sized in a way. And obviously, we were both playing this on Wii U. I know you played it mainly on the gamepad, Bally. Yes. I did kind of go between TV and gamepad, but I also was about 70% of the time playing on the gamepad. And I kind of a little to be desired when it comes to that screen and the size of the actual game in it, because obviously the Wii U gamepad is whatever size that screen is, and then this is a 3x4 game also shrunk down into a smaller subset of that.
Yeah, it's weird because it's not just two black blocks on the sides, it's also along the top and bottom, and you just think, come on, just spread it out a bit more. Like it's very frustrating in that sense.
It's a casualty of Wii U emulation with N64 that was, as everyone has kind of made the point of before in the past, was not very good, and I totally see where they're coming from here, because I haven't really played that many N64 games on the Wii U Virtual Console, and this one, definitely you can tell the lack of color saturation. Like, it feels like the colors are washed out a bit because of the emulation. And that's a little bit of a bummer. It led to a couple of instances that were a bit tricky. Like when you're in the forest, you're trying to figure out which route do you take. And one of the routes is like there's blinking eyes in the tree. And it was really hard for me to tell that those eyes were blinking because the gamepad was just so dark in general, and so you're in a dark area and it's not standing out. That was kind of the only time it affected gameplay for me, but it was a little bit of a bummer that this wasn't as kind of colourful and popping as I think the game originally probably looked like on N64, right? Because it really has a lot of bright characters and bright places you go to. So maybe that is a benefit to playing this on an actual emulator on a computer if you were to go that way. But I don't know. I hope that Nintendo, again, we talked about, you know, them not releasing GameCube stuff, but even N64 stuff is still not available on Switch, and you know, I think they've done a good job with the emulation quality on the Super Nintendo stuff on there. So I think if they get like M2 or someone to do that, it would be much better. And I'd love to see what this looks like, you know, on the Switch screen, and maybe blown up a bit more so I can actually see things a bit better, which would be nice. But yeah. So overall, I think that this game is great. It's excellent, and I have some quibbles here and there, like in terms of certain chapters and how good they are in terms of their design, and you know what they ask you to do. But really, aside from that, I think the variety, the combat, some of the decisions you have to make in terms of your leveling, all of it is super well considered, and it also has those moments that I had totally forgotten about, like the entire Peach sub-story of her like being in the castle and like doing the stealth stuff with her. Amazing, and I totally forgot that was in the game, and is just a kind of another feather in its cap, really, for what is a really, really good game that holds up and you know, passes the test of time, in my opinion. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this video game. I want to start with kind of the world, and the setup for this game. And one of the things I really like, actually, kind of talking about the start and the beginning, there's this idea for me of promise and setup, and then delivery on that promise and setup. And I think this game does that constantly in a lot of different ways. But the first way in which it does it is you go to that castle at the beginning, you have that party, and there are all these people around the castle. One of the funny things I noted, actually, was like, you know, all the modern Paper Mario fans are complaining because all the characters in the new games are toads. and you go you go here, and the game literally opens in a place called Toad Town, and then you go into the castle, and the first room you get into, literally all the characters are toads. So I was kind of laughing to myself of like, damn, these people who are like, these are the best games in the franchise, this game literally opens with just toads.
Is it not until the second room where you meet everyone from the different worlds?
Yes, exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So I think that's the second area where you, because I noted it, I was like, what? They're just toads here. Like, where are all these other characters? I just found that really funny as a way to like, jibe at those people in some ways of like, hey man, look, your beloved game just started with toads as well. So, but I totally get those complaints. I understand. I'm not, I'm not diminishing those issues because they certainly exist in the modern games. But the thing with the promise, right, is you go to that castle and you meet some penguins there. You meet some Yoshis there. You meet people or characters, and maybe not Yoshis, but you do meet characters like the shy guys with the kind of wraps around their head. Which we can talk about in terms of like stereotypes and the era, which and Mustafa and all of his stuff. But those different characters that you are going to meet throughout your journey are all there at the beginning of the game, and I think that's really cool. Another thing is the chapter openings. Every chapter opening shows you a shadow of the boss that you will face, right? And so all these things throughout the game, it happens with the Cooper Bros. You see them before you will fight them eventually. You get shown Tubba Blubber before you will eventually go on and take him on. A lot of it is set up of like Twink and Princess Peach kind of figuring out what's going to happen next and then delivering on that promise later on. And I think it does it really well. My favorite instance of something that kind of carries on through, I'm not sure this is the same thing, but at the beginning of the game, Mario gets chucked out the window by Bowser, and at the very end of the game, you get back to that room, and that window's still broken. And I was like, that is such a simple thing, but the fact that they thought about that to leave it like that contextually just makes this feel more like a world and a place than we're just Mario bumping around levels, Right, and I thought that was really smart generally.
I think the build on all the stuff you've mentioned is great. I noted like you meet a chef from the Shiver region, and obviously like the Shiveria kingdom I think is from Mario Odyssey, so like they're playing with the same kind of frosty themes around that. And I love that the game just dangles the carrot of promise, and this was the next step you get to. I think one thing it does at the very start of the game, and I love this about a game like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, for example, where, sure, you start on Outset Island, the story starts off, and then you have that initial quest, that journey from Outset Island to Windfall Island, which is the hub area of Wind Waker. And I think this game does a really good job where you start by like your house or Luigi's house, and then you're kind of in the Goomba town. You interact with all the Goombas, and then you go on like this little mini quest to fight the initial mini first boss kind of thing, King Goomba, and then you're greeted by the entry to Toad Town. And it's like I think that build up is such an important narrative thing that is, it's almost like that Walt Disney story of like, he wants from the car park to getting onto that first ride, he wants it to be like a build up of, this is you entering the park, and then you see the castle, and it's about that gradual reveal of the main parts of the game. So I think if the game had just, I mean, it does start in Toad Town because you do go to the castle, but then it drops you back at Mario's house. You don't see the rest of Toad Town. It's all hidden. And I love the build up to Toad Town, where you don't see the whole of Toad Town until like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours in, a bit less than that. And that's when you realize, oh wait, this town is huge, and it kind of expands onto all these things. And I think the game does a really good job of just building on all those areas. Yeah,
Toad Town is definitely a place that is memorable, and it definitely is. When you first get there, you're like, because your first expectation of a town is literally, there's this town called Goomba Town, or Goomba Village I should say, which literally the residents are one family of Goombas and a toad, and that's it. That's Goomba Village, is this one family. I have a note here that I wrote down that says Grandma Goomba is disturbing, and I can't remember what she looks like now, but apparently I thought she looked disturbing. I do really like, and that's the thing, right? When we talk about character and we talk about the way in which they really take these known Mario entities and give them a personality, you just take a look at that first area and you've got the dad Goomba with a moustache on, and you've got the old Goombas, the old Goomba parents, as well as the younger Goombas with Goombario and Goombaria, I think. And, you know, Goombario is like a big Mario fanboy, and he's got a cap on, and obviously he comes with you as your first partner character. And I wish I had used him a bit more in terms of just popping him out here and there to tell me about places, because he's so
great. Whenever you get stuck on any puzzle, he'll just like hint at this, hint at that, and I used him much more near the end of the game, just kind of like when I got a little bit stuck at a dead end or something.
I had no idea. Yeah, I didn't really use him for that at all. I popped him out rarely when I was in a new location, but I think one of the issues is you have to open the menu, pop him out. It doesn't take that long, but I think one of the risks that I found is I don't want to enter a battle with the wrong partner character equipped, because then I could be at a disadvantage in a certain battle. And so when I'm wandering around spaces with enemies in, I definitely wasn't bringing Goombario out. Early on, I was using him a lot more to tattle, because once he has figured out an enemy's HP bar and defenses and stuff, it will stay every time you fight that type of enemy, which is really useful. But as it went on, he became less and less useful as a character, like physically, and therefore I didn't do that as much. And eventually I got the badge which told me, you know, enemy HPs anyway, so I didn't need to.
I don't think I got that till before end of chapter 6.
It was really late, when I got it as well, for sure. But it was definitely helpful in that sense. But yeah, let's talk about Toad Town. And Jackpot writes in about it and says, I think Toad Town is a standout location that seems to open up just the right amount of exploration each time a chapter is completed. Discovering the new locations every chapter introduces is interesting, and for the most part, with each area being fun to explore. While I personally find the toy box in Chapter 4 to be a bit of a slog due to the backtracking required to complete some of the puzzles, there really aren't too many low points in my eyes. My personal favourites are the Cooper Brothers Fortress in Chapter 1 and Chapter 5's Lava Lava Island. Lava Piranha is a very cool fight. And yeah, I think I was always trying to wonder to myself, well, I feel like we've gone out every entrance here from Toad Town, so where are we going next? Like what? I was trying to figure out like what is the location and trying to preempt it almost. And you get to a point where like, okay, well the train goes there, the haunted house goes there. I'm like, where am I going?
And then there's actually like 3 exits to 3 other areas where you've got Toy Town, the flower gardens, or whatever they're called, flower fields.
Yeah, flower fields.
And then the Shiver region at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Like those are hidden in like some weird ways, right? Because the toy box is literally a tiny world inside of Toad Town itself, and that's an area where Toad Town itself is kind of a dungeon because you're chasing the Shy Guys around. Yeah. I agree with Jackpot. That is probably the weakest chapter in the game. It's the only chapter I actually did on live stream as well, which is probably not the best. I always have this habit, Bally, of choosing when I'm going to stream a section of the game. For whatever reason, I always stream the worst part of it. Like with Halo, when we stream that level.
I mean, I would also argue it's probably the shortest, which is good. I don't think there's many that are shorter than that, if any.
No, that's true. It definitely it doesn't have, because what a lot of these chapters have is a lot of build up, right? You have like a pre-dungeon section which can be quite long, and then a dungeon section which itself can be long as well and has puzzles in it and lots of stuff. Yeah.
When you think of that dry desert, like you're getting a train to this location, going over a mountain, going to like a little kind of like what's it called, where like archaeologist work site, and then you're going through the desert to like a town beyond the desert, finding out everything from the town, then going back into the desert, doing a dungeon, and then coming all the way back. Like it's just a really elongated, long, and it makes it feel a lot more, you know, long and epic and really impressive, like a JRPG would. I just love that build up for the majority of chapters.
Yeah, it's it can definitely, I think it works better at the beginning of the game. Maybe, here's another thing, right? Because we're playing this on a time crunch and we needed to finish it before a certain amount of, before we recorded this episode, maybe I felt like, oh, can we just get on with this? Can we just get going? Which I think is maybe a bit unfair to the game, because I think for the most part, it doesn't feel too padded. Like the only section I felt were like, oh, come on, why am I doing this? Was in the toy box and in the flower fields. Those are the 2 locations.
There's a lot of backtracking within both of those levels. And I do think the game is a little bit guilty of like backtracking puzzles. And what I mean by that is I'd rather puzzles that are related to kind of backtracking were much shorter distances, where it's like, it's like link this point to that point within the single screen, rather than like, right, you need to take this thing all the way back here and then you come back. There's quite a lot of that in the game generally.
Yeah, especially like there's that one section in the flower fields where it's the maze, the kind of grass maze you go through, and it's like
back and forth through a maze.
You go through the maze, and then you talk to the flower, and she's like, "I have this pretty thing. I'm not going to give it to you unless you can find me something more pretty." And then you go and you have to go back through the maze, and you find the other pretty thing. You have to go back through the maze, and then you give it to them, and then you have to go back through the maze again to get out of it. And it's like, I've gone through this maze like fucking 5 times, and it's not necessarily that interesting because it's just like artificially blocking you in spaces, and you do eventually find a way to get through it faster without using the kind of tunnels, the pipes to get through. But yeah, that was a point where I was like, "Hey, come on, man!" Like it's whatever, like Wednesday, and I have to beat this by Friday, and I'm just like trying to get through this fucking flower field.
I'm just going back and forth through this maze, trying to
Exactly. Which, yeah, I think in some cases it was unfair of me to say that, but in other cases I think it is a fair critique of like the toy box area and of that flower fields area of, yeah, like I really like the aesthetic of those places. I think a lot more so than maybe, I don't know, the desert area, which is a bit generic, and it's like, oh, it's a desert, it's cool, whatever. But what they actually ask you to do in those places is not as interesting necessarily. And it requires a lot of, switching between characters of like, okay, go to Parakarry to fly over this little gap, and then back to Lester to fly over this spikes, and a lot of switching. At that point in the game, you have a lot of different characters, and there's a lot of switching between people and all that type of stuff. But getting a bit ahead of ourselves maybe. When we talk about like the narrative of this game, I think it's interesting in terms of, Mario games never really have a story. I always like talk about narrative framing as a thing, as that's what Mario games are. They don't really have a story to speak of. It's like Peach has been captured by Bowser, that's it. And I think this game doesn't go much beyond that, but it at least introduces a idea and kind of this notion of the stars as this kind of overlooking almost god figures, I would say. I don't know how you
just like
them.
Ocarina of Time, they're like the seven sages, Oh
yeah, they are. It's the 7 sages, right?
Exactly.
It's totally kind of cribbing off of that idea, and I love that setup, right? It is exactly that, of go to these places, find these people, bring them together so that you can defeat the big bad. And it's simple in its setup, but I think it works, and it's a good justification for why Bowser, even though Mario's beaten Bowser a million times, it's like, well, this time he's got this invincible thing which will make him invincible. So in order to stop him from doing that, we need to go and find all the stars. And again, it's like, having those stars give you different powers as well, I thought was really cool. Just the idea of the star power, and the ways in which they can help you within gameplay as well as being part of the story, that you're slowly getting stronger and stronger as more stars you accumulate, was nice. And I love that area as well. The first time you go to the kind of star hill and all the stars like falling on the ground and that type of stuff, the place where you can like trade for badges and go up to the top is it's a really great setting, I think.
Totally. I think that having the sort of 7 stars works really well. It's kind of paces it all out, and I think that you're right. It is just still Peach is getting stolen, Bowser's powerful, we need to bring down Bowser, and sure, that is a pretty limited story for a JRPG, but where so many of these JRPGs are more about the end world ending and how you're going to bring it back from that. This one's much more about kind of how you get there and interacting with all the characters. But I'm not saying other RPGs aren't. They of course are, but this one I think crutches a lot more on just kind of characters and funny interactions rather than the importance of the world ending, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think one of the most impressive things about it, in terms of when you go to places or go back to places after things have happened and things have changed, like, speaking of Toad Town as a place that evolves and develops in terms of characters will comment on things that have happened or will change their dialogue very often after you have done a chapter. So going back through there and talking to people again is actually valuable, and you can actually get more of a sense of what is going on. And there are moments in there where I think it was maybe in chapter 5 or something, I came back to Toad Town and Goombario's mum and sister were there, and they're just like shopping in Toad Town basically and just hanging out. and you talk to them, and then if you have Goombario in your party, you get unique dialogue with Goombario talking to them. And this happens quite a bit, I think, of depending on who you have in your party and who you are talking to, they will comment on it. And so they have to account for that by having all these characters have something to say in certain situations depending on who you have at that moment in time, which is quite a lot when you think about the number of characters in the game and the number of situations that you could have them be in. I think it's really impressive, and it's not from Nintendo something I would expect for them to put a focus on, right? Because when it comes down to it, they have never been that great at telling stories or at building out memorable characters, and that type of thing. It's one of the weaknesses as a video game creator, and I think this is a real standout in terms of their ability to. And I think the localization does a lot of work here in terms of, making these characters unique and stand out. I don't know what the original Japanese is like, but I certainly think the localization is fantastic. Just that idea that things are changing in this world and characters will, comment on different things. Like if you have Koopa in your party, when you talk to Colorado, the explorer guy in the desert, you go back to him with Koopa, he'll be like, have a little conversation with him specifically, and you won't get that unless you talk to him with that character in your party. So I'm sure there's a bunch of little things that I missed in the game because I didn't have that person in my party talking to that particular character at that particular time. And that's really neat. Very, very cool. So yeah, in terms of the other parts of the game, like obviously Mario's journey is he's just going, to all these different places, meeting new different partner characters and solving the individual issues of those areas. Peach in this game also has a major role to play, and I think it's a really cool and forward-thinking in some ways, backward-thinking in other ways, like ways in which Peach is deployed in this game as a character and as a way of shaking things up and kind of giving you a bit of a refreshment, right? Like after you have gone through that long fight at the end of a chapter, having gone through a dungeon, all that stuff, it feels like a really nice reprieve, to have this Peach section where it's like, there's no combat here, we're going to explore the castle, maybe do a little bit of fun stealth, and get some good kind of a characterization, sometimes from the guard, sometimes from Bowser, those types of things. How did you feel about, and did you know about any of this stuff beforehand, Bally? Were you surprised when you started controlling Princess Peach?
I was surprised. I had no idea, totally. And yeah, it is refreshing to be able to kind of play as Peach in a game like this and kind of see everything from her perspective. I wouldn't argue they're giving her any agency. She is still a prisoner within this castle,
yes.
And you are never going outside of the castle. And every time you try, you get taken back to your room.
Yeah, and like dumped on the floor, and like
getting
the animation.
Dumped on the floor. I'm not a big fan of characters ordering female characters to go and make them a cake, this kind of thing. I don't think that's maybe aged the best, although the actual process,
as much as I actually enjoyed making the cake, that section was fun gameplay wise,
yes. And I think the quiz is really fun. That's a good part, and there's quizzes generally throughout the game which I think are really good fun. I really like those Peach sections, and I don't know if you get to play as Peach anymore in later Mario games, or she actually has enough agency to not be a prisoner and explore the world herself. I don't know, but it was cool to play as her, and I love the build of playing around in the castle, and then just before the final Bowser boss fight, you are Mario in those very same locations, going around the castle in the exact same rooms that she can experience.
Yes, so you can go into her bedroom as well, can't you? And like take a look around, and it feels, again, it's the promise and delivery thing of like, oh, I've seen this place so much, but now it's from this slightly different perspective.
Is it her bedroom you have to go into to heal?
I'm not sure, because I don't think I tried healing in there or anything. I don't think there is a
I was the same. I didn't heal before the final boss. Like I had to. There was no clear healing place, as it were.
Because it wouldn't make sense, because when you're at Princess Peach in that castle, there are no heal blocks there, so it wouldn't make logical sense for there to suddenly have a heal block appear.
I meant you could just like get in her bed and heal, and then
I see. Like because in the dungeon in that last area, when you open up the dungeon for the toads, there are the toads there who do give you a bed, and her like, this isn't a toad house, but hey man, lie down on this thing if you want, I guess.
But there's a bunch of enemies between that Toad healing section and then the final fight. And
yeah, I went into that final fight with 15 HP and 15 FP. It wasn't great.
Yeah, same. So I had to use all my items on the first phase and then was fine with the second. But anyway, I like the Peach sections and they were a real surprise, totally.
Yeah, I think that I really like this umbrella, but you get it right at the end, and then you don't use it again. Use it for that one section, and you can use it to stealth around the castle by turning into the guard and then turning into the big guy with the spike ball. But ultimately, every time, and this has to happen because Mario has to be the one to save the day, of course. Ultimately, every time you end it by Bowser being like, Princess Peach, why are you here? I'm going to throw you into the room again. Although you do get, I think there is that moment, I think maybe the first or second time where Peach is, sees Bowser and like hears their conversation, and Bowser's like, I'm really nervous about talking to Princess Peach. He's given that characterization, and it's like, well, I mean, you thinking about it from today's perspective, I know that back then they were trying to like make you sympathetic with Bowser, but like this man has kidnapped this woman and is holding her hostage. Yeah, and he's like, I
really like a section with Peach where you can go and like read Bowser's diary, and that's like how there's Bowser, just idea of Bowser writing down his thoughts and feelings about the day is really
maybe
funny.
That's what I'm thinking of is that part is when you kind of get his interiority.
I think there's both actually. I think you do over here, but then you maybe follow up and read the diary, and then it reveals the next area that you're meant to go to.
And like him talking about Mario and like that Mario guy, I hate him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's really funny writing, and I do like that they. It's not like they're giving Bowser depth really with that, but it is like putting him in a place that you haven't necessarily seen him be put before, because he's not a character otherwise. Like none of these people are characters in any of these traditional Mario games. They are avatars, right? Like they are Mario, you move him and he jumps. And still in this game, Mario, you move him and he jumps, but I guess it's the characters around him that provide that kind of spice and flavor to everything going on. So yeah. Also, I'm going to shout out Peach at one point calls Bowser, quote, a major bonehead. And I was like, boy, Nintendo, they're really pushing out the boat with some of this language. A major bonehead. Peach definitely mad at Bowser. I thought that was very funny. So yes, I think we have a comment. I want to talk about the world and setting a little bit on this comment from Rachel, who says the enemy variety is a glimpse into what Darwinian evolution would look like in the Mushroom Kingdom. Yes, it's a fuzzy, but this one is green and lives in the forest. I've not played Super Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo, and so I don't know if this originated there, but it makes the Mushroom Kingdom feel much more of an actual place rather than a background as it is in most Mario games. Same goes for NPCs. Yes, it's still all Goombas and Koopas, etc., but they each have a bit more character to them, even if it's just a name or a hat or some sunglasses to set them apart. I understand the criticism of the later Paper Mario games just using standard Toads all the time much more now. Meanwhile, I also prefer this over the later Mario and Luigi games using all new enemy types for given areas, as they were just less memorable than the original Mario enemies. This is the best of both worlds. All this makes the gameplay outside of battles worthwhile, as despite that itself being very vanilla, go there, do that, collect star quests, there's no real surprise to find Bowser kidnap Peach and Mario needs to collect the stars after all. You look forward to what you might find next. That and the writing, which while not as a joke a minute as the newer games, has certainly tickled me greatly as I've gone along. And yeah, like talking about the characters in these spaces, moving into that kind of part of the conversation is interesting, because I do like that there are, like when I say Colorado, you can picture exactly what he looks like as a Koopa versus Koopa versus the old Grandpa Koopa, who every time he talks his dialogue shakes up and down, which I really like as a nice touch.
Koopa Coot. Can I bring in a quick quotation from Koopa Coot?
Yes, go
I was a quotation. It was a book that he has at the back of his house.
Okay.
And I think I'll read it first. So it says firmer shells in 30 days, and it's basically a reference to like I read it as like old person erectile dysfunction.
I was exactly going to say that, erectile dysfunction.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I just think is absolutely hilarious for like a Mario game. Am I right in saying it is the case that Miyamoto has in recent years put the kibosh on, you cannot have Koopas with mustaches, they have to be plain Koopas. Is that the case?
Well, the thing is, right, there's a Toad in Origami King who's like very different and like dresses differently, and I think there are lots of Toads and different characters who do have slightly different ways in which they appear, but I think there's like a specific way in which he has. I think someone like Colorado wouldn't happen in a new Paper Mario today, if you know what I mean. Like, he is full, head to toe, dressed wise, completely different looking from a traditional Koopa.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of more what we're getting at with the Miyamoto problem there.
Interesting.
And it's like there's a degree to which you can. I feel like there's one degree to which you can slightly change, but like the character Bobby, who's a Bob-omb in Origami King, he just looks like a regular Bob-omb. The only difference is they've given him a name, and even that name is not really. He asks you not to call him it, and he's like, "I'm just a Bob-omb," right? Versus someone like Bombette, who like has character and looks different and is a distinctive version of that archetype, but you would never see a pink Bob-omb. Actually, having said that, I think you throw pink Bob-ombs in that Mario 64 DS minigame. Maybe you do, or maybe in that one where you move them from left to right in the different columns.
They are red and black.
Red and black. Okay.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember. But yes, I think that might be some of the issue. Again, I haven't read up on Miyamoto's ban hammer in a while, so I might have to go and review that information. But yeah, it's really cool. And how did you feel about like these different places, the characters that inhabited them, and did you have any in particular NPCs that were memorable to you? Obviously, we'll get on to the partner characters who are kind of the most important ones, but any of those kind of towns and places filled with characters that you enjoyed?
Yeah, I really loved it all, honestly. I think Colorado actually has some of the best writing, and he keeps reappearing throughout the game.
He crops up a lot, doesn't he? Right? Like, you do the Lava Island section with him, and he's going after his treasure and trying to find things.
I love that with the treasure, where you have that escape sequence at the end of chapter, I think it's 5, isn't it? Chapter 5, and you explode out the lava, and then the treasure chest, explodes somewhere else, and you never see it. And I just assumed it had vanished, and then you realize later, you actually need to find that chest, and you have to go back and get it, and then you give it to Colorado, and he gives you the seed in return. Like, I love that it has that joke of, he was so close to the treasure, and then it eluded him, kind of Indiana Jones style, and then later you realize you actually do need that treasure, and you go and give it to him anyway. And the whole thing with like his wife, and his wife's mad at him because he just ignores her and goes and explores, and they even follow that up in like the credits in the game, which I think is hilarious, where he's now off in like the Shiver region exploring that. So yeah, I thought that was very clever. And I think you interact with his wife very early in the game, because she's in Koopa Village.
Right, before you've even met him.
She's
like, my husband is away and he sucks and all this stuff, right?
So you're getting that build for him. He's essentially covers the whole game in some senses, which I think is very cool.
Yes, absolutely. He's definitely one of the better, more fleshed out side characters, I think, and he continues to have a role as you go through the game. And then you have the Yoshis who don't really. I think like Sushi as a character is interesting as a side character, because when I went to that Yoshi area, I was like, am I going to get a Yoshi companion? That sounds really cool. And then they flip it and it's not, and it's like the babysitter who becomes your companion, and you're like, okay, that's interesting, and it makes sense like gameplay wise for you to be able to do that. But before we get to those partner characters, I think that obviously the whole winter region, the entire section, the murder mystery with the penguins, is one of my favorite parts of that game. You have Herringway, which is a riff on Hemingway, who is a writer, who is the one who you think is like being accused in this murder, and just that entire setup I thought was fantastic, right? Because by this point in the game, it's like the last chapter, and I'm like, okay, I've done a lot of stuff. I feel like I'm just getting to the end here, and I just I kind of was like, okay, I need to finish this game. Let's get to it. But the game, I think, does such a good job of just throwing you into this situation that you don't expect, and all of a sudden Mario is locked in this town, and he has to go around and figure out what happened and talk to all the characters. And obviously, I think both of us were like, oh shit, are they actually killing this guy who's fucking murdered a penguin? And I was of the opinion that he's probably going to wake up and, that type of thing would happen, which, Miyamoto, as I think I messaged you being like, look, man, Miyamoto wanted at the end of GoldenEye all the people you killed to shake hands with you to pretend that you didn't actually kill them. So I don't think he would want to have a literal penguin murder in this very cute and charming video game.
Because he is one of the sort of official producers on this game, isn't he?
Totally.
Miyamoto?
Yeah. Very much was involved in all the Mario stuff this era in Nintendo's history for sure. But I really like the mayor and his kind of interactions with Herringway, and like, the reason that he was knocked out is because he tried to get this present for his friend Herringway, and then Herringway is the one who gets accused in the murder. And I also love that the mayor's wife is like, "You motherfucker," and she's just like, she's like, "Leave me alone."
She's like, yeah.
There's also some really great dialogue in the town. There's one penguin I wrote down who says, "I don't socialize with murderers. Get away from me." And I'm like, okay. This is because you're so used to in these games, and I think in a lot of the other Paper Mario games, or even in the Mario and Luigi series, Mario is literally a walking god, right? Like, everyone knows who he is, even though he has no personality at all. People treat him as like literal Christ, and he is the greatest person of all time. And so I found it great to have this section of the game where everyone thinks you're a murderer and they hate you and they don't want to be anywhere near you, and they're like, "Leave me alone, please." I thought that was great, and worked really nicely. And I think the other side character who we haven't mentioned yet, who you could easily forget about, and I think the game kind of treats as a joke, is the little fucking kid who's in an egg, and he like fights you at the end of chapters sometimes, and he's like treated as like, when you're leaving the lava section, he's like, finally I swam all across the ocean.
Like your Pokemon rival,
right?
They just
totally.
appear randomly, and
except he's like so much lamer than that as a character, even though some of his fights can be quite challenging, right? Like he does beef himself up a bit.
But he beefs up with like, he's got a spiky helmet, and then he gets wings, and then you're like, how am I going to take out a guy with like spiky helmet and wing? And like, I like how it plays on that.
Definitely. That egg guy was fun. One of my favorite little details is, again, in that ice area, after you beat him, you come back later on, and he's lying there frozen in a block of ice because he's been lying on the floor.
And he just stays there for like the rest of the game. Like, you keep passing him.
I don't think he comes back after that, does he? He's just like stuck there frozen in ice, maybe? I don't remember him coming back near the end.
No, he interrupts so you face like the four Koopa kids, who are obviously like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which
right.
Is
You
hilarious.
thought you were going to redo the boss fight from earlier, and then he pops in.
And then you face him again there
for the final time. Yeah. Very true. Cool. Let's talk about the partner characters, because I think this is definitely one of the best parts of the game, and I think it's something that is sorely missing from the modern iterations. That a lot of it's maybe even more so than the RPG elements, the idea of partner characters being gone is something I think that probably hurts Paper Mario fans the most, because I think they are such a breath of fresh air in terms of who they are as characters. Obviously, you don't, I think after you get them to join your party, you really don't hear a lot from them again unless they are involved in something, or unless you have them out when you're talking to someone. But I think they do a really good job of establishing them within their own areas, within their own chapters, and kind of all the things that they're dealing with. And did you have any from a character perspective favorite, and did you have any from a combat perspective that you really relied on and used the most?
I think character perspective, it's hard to get past Goombario. I think just a little Goomba who wants to be Mario is just the best idea possible for a game that is essentially spoofing on the Mario universe. That's one point I wanted to make earlier that I forgot to make, but I think what's so crazy is that this is basically a take on the Mushroom Kingdom. And when you think of things that do a take on something, normally there's a lot of time between the original thing and then the thing doing the take on the thing. So the idea that Mario 64 comes out in 1996, I want to say? Yeah. And then for the take on Mario 64, essentially, which is a large part of what this game is, comes out in 2001. Like, I think that's quite a small amount of time.
It's within the same console generation as well.
In the same console generation, for people to be like, right, this is what the Mario world looks like in 3D. And now here's a funny take on that world. And I think a funny take on the world cannot be symbolized better than a Goomba who wants to be Mario. So Goombario has to be my favorite character. And you do the most chat with him because he's the guy I kept going back to kind of like say, oh, I'm stuck on this puzzle. Tell me where I'm going, kind of thing. And then At the start of the game, he is good. He's very good in battle. And then in the middle of the game, I felt like he was much weaker. But then by the end of the game, again, he was actually decent in battle. But I think that combat-wise, Cooper is probably the best in battle, certainly for the first 2/3 of the game. And then the final third of the game, Lackey Lester, or whatever he's called, is probably the best. And I faced the final boss with that side character, and his cloud defenses and ability to attack all enemies and throwing the spinies, very, very useful character.
Nice. Yeah. I think for me, character-wise, I think Bo is probably my favorite. Just because of her, like, she's in this mansion, she's kind of stringing you along. She has that interactions with Bootler, who's like her butler boo, who's also like
that's fun. That whole section is very good.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite chapters, chapter 3 overall, and she has this kind of desire, this need to protect her kingdom, quote unquote, from Tubba Blubber, who is going around eating booze. He is literally swallowing all of her, people that she's looking after, the people in her haunted mansion area, and she's like, Mario, you need to help me take this Tubba Blubber guy down, and I like how crucial she is as a character. Mechanics wise in that chapter, in terms of her hiding you, and like when you're fighting against the heart of Tubba Blubber down below, it's a very easy fight, but it's only very easy as long as you have her in the party, right? Because otherwise he does so much damage to you that you will not be alive for long enough to deal with that. So yeah, I really like her overall, and I think that she does have some nice lines here and there. Also, Bombette kind of pops up with some lines later in the game, kind of unprompted.
I was just going to say the slap with what's her name, Bo.
With Bo, yes,
it's hilarious. Just that's a very funny move.
Yes, it's really good for those characters that have 0 defense. If you have anyone who has like at least 1 defense, it's pointless because she only does 1 damage per hit, and so. Yeah, but it can be really, really good for certain areas, and I used her quite a lot during battle. My actual 2 characters that I crutched on the most were Watt and Sushi, actually.
Wow, okay.
What I really liked, because I think I like them both for the same reason, really, is because they have the ability to do a lot of damage. Watt is really good because Watt will break through defenses, right? And so if something has 5 defense, that doesn't matter. Watt does like almost magic damage, as it were, I think. It's not physical, right, with the electric shock, and so it kind of goes through any of that stuff. So if you're having trouble with really heavy defense characters, Watt is amazing. Also, Watt has an ability to boost Mario's attack, and so by doing the timing window for those, his attack gets raised, and you're able to do an extra point of damage every hit you do, and you can max that out at 4 turns. And if you're really good at that little mini game to get the attack boosted, it lasts for a really long time. And then Sushi also has the defensive version of that, so you take less damage for 4 turns basically. And so those were both really helpful, I found. Alongside, Sushi has a really powerful and easy to pull off special move with the blast, the water blast, and then a bit of a trickier one when it comes to her kind of hit everybody move, but she also has a really good hit everybody move. Sushi was probably my most used character in the late game, I would say, and Watt I used sparingly as well, just because Watt was able to paralyze people if you were in a situation where you just needed people out the way because you would take too much damage. So it kind of acted as a stopper almost to stop people from hitting you. So yeah, and I liked Parakarry as well. I used him for certain areas, but his timing was quite tricky in terms of hitting the button and getting that stuff
the
down.
Yoshi throw egg.
No, Parakarry is the flying guy. Cooper.
Yeah, I know. I meant by his attack is like throwing an egg in Yoshi's Island, so that with the okay, I know what you mean. Yes, right, I thought you were talking about Lackey Lester throwing the thing like throwing the egg, but no, that's also another comparison.
Yes, yeah, because it basically goes up and down. Yeah, that attack is really good, but also he has Air Raid, which is a multi-hit attack also later in the game, which is
right.
Does a lot of damage. When you think about it, a lot of characters kind of act in a similar way, but I think the benefit of some of these ones, like Watt, for example, is if you have the bats on the ceiling, Cooper just becomes pointless, right? That I like Cooper a lot, but by the time you get enemies that are in the air, he can't hit any of them, and so that's really tricky.
Yeah, it's kind of where I moved to Lackey Lester, was to because he can hit enemies anywhere, which is useful.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Helps quite a bit. So yeah, I like the partner character system a lot. I do find that it's definitely a trade-off in battle, right? Because you could be in battle and you're like, wow, I really need to switch to this character, and like turn order and like the order in which you do it. If you want a partner character that you don't have in right now to come in and do an attack, like if someone's charging and you need bow right now to make you disappear, you have to use Mario to switch the character, because then that will give the character's turn the ability to use a move, versus if you want Mario to use a move but then switch the character won't be able to attack that turn, but they will switch that turn, right? And so it is a process of figuring out how you want to approach it and what is the best like order in which to do things. Like sometimes
because you can then get them to go first next turn, like it doesn't feel like a whole turn sometimes.
Exactly, yeah. And so it is, sometimes it is with Watt and boosting Mario's attack, I often at the start of the battle would have Watt attack first so that he could get that boost, and then Mario's first attack would have a boost to it initially, instead of having to wait for the next turn for that to take effect, if you know what I mean. So yeah, a little bit of kind of moving things around with characters. Jackpot had a comment on characters as well. It says, the cast of characters in Paper Mario is the game's greatest strength in my eyes. They are all written to perfection with hilarious dialogue and charmingly, admittedly fairly simple backstories. While the excellent writing is still a staple of the Paper Mario franchise to this day, what sets the original and Thousand Year Door apart is the characterization of the partners. While they're all based on traditional Mario enemies, they are far more than just a Goomba or a Koopa, and each has a real personality. Going back home to check on Luigi always cracks me up too. Do you go back much to check on Luigi in his house? I think I went once.
Do you have to go through that pipe?
Yeah, the pipe in Toad
I
Town.
think I did it like once fairly early game, but I didn't later.
Yeah. I think that all these characters have something about them that is different and therefore makes them memorable, right? And that speaks to this idea of like, well, when I was talking to you earlier about that Toad who looks slightly different in Origami King, to be frank with you, I can't remember what he looks like, right? But I think in 5 years' time, I will remember what Koopa looks like. I will remember, who Watt is. I will know what Bombette, that she was pink, right? Like I'll remember those details because they are so unique to these individual characters versus your regular kind of Mario enemies. And I like that. And I was in the Shiver area also thinking, oh, it'd be nice to have a penguin character here, but the penguin isn't. And I guess that's wrong, right? Because what is Watt a character, a traditional Mario enemy in any game? I don't think that type of like he's not really a fuzzy.
Oh, I think
really
Watt is probably, so if you ever on anything electrical and you get electrocuted, I think Watt is just meant to represent that. Yeah,
I think so. I think that's probably what it is. That makes sense. Because it's the only character that I could think of who's not like a traditional Mario enemy that you fight, really. Yeah, maybe just like the electricity that's going around a platform in a Mario game, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And I was like, yeah, I would like to have a penguin, but a penguin's not really a traditional Mario character.
They have to be a Mario enemy, I guess. They can't just
Mario enemy, yes, who like switches sides and decides to work with him, which is like, that's kind of the nice thing about this, right? And it makes you recontextualize the whole idea of what Mario does throughout his journey, which is murdering these characters who actually have personality.
Yeah, I mean, canon wise, my impression from this game is that like there's lots of Goombas. Some of those Goombas work for Bowser, others don't. You know, like that's my impression of these different races. I guess is that there's lots of them. They don't all work for Bowser. Some of them do, some of them don't.
Because you do fight Goombas in this game, right? And so there are good Goombas, there are bad Goombas, I guess, is what the game.
There are good people, there are bad people. People aren't just one people, you know, right?
Exactly. There we go.
Why are Goombas any different?
Exactly. Yeah, totally. The biting social commentary of Paper Mario over here. Cool. Well, we've kind of talked a little bit about the combat, but should we get into it? Let's talk about the battle system and everything going on with it. I actually want to start with a comment from Acerbus that I thought was really interesting regarding the fights and the way that leveling works and that stuff. And maybe we can see if we agree or disagree with it. He says, one of the most interesting aspects of the game is its scaling. Setting experience at a flat 100 per level makes the game simple and transparent, with no complicated calculations going on behind the scenes, and this philosophy is also employed in the battle system. However, by limiting the amount of experience you can possibly gain to small integers, you lose a degree of granularity that can make it so a lot of times fights aren't worth your time, because you only get 1 point towards the next level. But of course, none of this matters that much, because your level doesn't directly control how strong you are. You get stronger by exploring and finding badges or permanent power-ups. In this sense, I think that the common complaint of the modern Paper Mario games, that the battles don't matter, actually applies more than you would think at first blush to this original game as well. And then he says, in brackets, I think the above might come off as negative and critical, but I actually really like the scaling and battle system and how it links with exploration and encourages you to interact with all the systems and shops in the game. I think the game has such a fundamentally different approach to a traditional RPG and prioritizes completely different ideas that it can make observations of things I like seem like comparative complaints. In conclusion, I think all of the following is true. 1, the battle system is really good. 2, the battles don't matter that much. 3, the fact that the battles don't matter that much is really good, which I think was a fun way of putting it. And I think from this perspective, when it comes to how much the battles matter and how much it matters in terms of you leveling up, for me, leveling up was never really in this game about making Mario stronger, because it literally isn't. It's all about survivability for me, right? It's all about how much longer can you go without having to use an item or without having to get to a heart box to heal yourself fully, right? It's about increasing your range of abilities to the degree that you feel much more confident and comfortable living through all these encounters, essentially. I don't know how you feel about that, Bally, but that's kind of the perspective I took.
Yeah, I think they do directly impact power in some senses with a lot of the badges. I think the badges are ultimately fundamentally, the more slots you have, the more things Mario can do, and some of those things Mario can do are actually to use more powerful moves, and they scale the weight of those moves perfectly by making the more powerful moves cost more FP. So
right.
I don't know if you know what level you were by the end of the game, because if you pause the menu in the main world, you can see what level Mario is. I think I finished the game on level 23, 24.
Okay.
Do you know at all?
I don't know. I do remember maxing out my badge points, though.
I did max out badge points. I think 40 is the max.
It was 30. It was 30.
30? Yeah, max 30. And I don't think I maxed either of the other two. I think I was maybe 45 on both, I believe, by the end.
Oh,
of the
wow.
game.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was 40 and 35 on mine.
35.
Yeah.
So I disagree with the service where say you level up, say you're in an area and you're taking 2 stars per enemy, and then you level up and then suddenly you're getting 1 star per enemy. So there is like maths going on in the background of like scaling, as he's saying. But I still think that if you are missing battles and some of those enemies are gated behind levels and this sort of thing, I do think you will be a lower level by the end of the game, and as a result you'll have less access to FP and HP and badge points, which I do think matter, just not in the traditional JRPG sense maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it has as big an impact, right? Like if you are 3 levels higher than me at the end of the game, I don't think that makes a bigger difference as it would, say, in Xenoblade, right? Where literally, if you are under-leveled, you won't hit any of your attacks. You'll just miss them, right? Which is not how this game works. This game gives you... We both have the same power level of our Mario by the end, right? Because we both have the powerful boots. We both have the powerful hammer. Therefore, the base damage that we do is the same. It just depends on what types of badge we're using, right? You went much more turtly, as you tend to do, very defensive, and you were saying that, you know, you took a while to take on Bowser at the end because of that strategy. You were dodging with the cloud and you were kind of taking your time with it, whereas me, I had all my items, I juiced Mario up, and I put on the Mega Jump badge, which uses 5 FP, right? So you do need to be a high enough level to have enough FP to utilize this move enough times so that you can therefore output a lot more power. But that Mega Jump badge, along with Watt giving me an attack boost, meant I was doing 9 damage every jump on Bowser's head. And it made it quite easy for me to get through that fight as a result of that. So despite the fact that we were kind of at a similar level and similar, ability, we both approached it totally differently. And I think that's the nice thing about the battle system here is despite the fact that, sure, from a broad perspective, the idea of leveling up doesn't matter as much maybe as people harp on about when they talk about these old Paper Mario games. I do think that it just affords you more options, right? Like just the amount of FP you have means that you're able to do much more with your partner characters by using those abilities and having more to rely on, essentially.
Yeah, and I had the luxury for having lots of badge points, for example, of equipping the strength against fire, the defense against fire. I had the defense against spikes. Like, I thought all of these might be incorporated into that final Bowser fight. So you're almost paying for the luxury of not having to shifty around your badges constantly, which I think is nice. And then in backing up a Cerberus's point, I do think that ultimately this game is a game about meters, like many JRPGs are, but this one maybe more overtly. And you've got your 3 meters, you've got your health, your FP, and your star meter. And completely regardless of XP that you're gaining, as long as you're progressing the story, you will gain more and more stars on your star meter, which can have a huge impact on the battle from a healing perspective, an attacking perspective, or as you did in this game, basically don't use it and just focus all your turns on everything else to do with attacks, HP, and FP. So like it gives you that option.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly star powers in there that were helpful. I think I used the chill out power on Bowser, which was lowers the amount of attack damage that your enemy does, which I thought was really helpful. And again, that's great that works on bosses, because sometimes those types of debuffs don't work on bosses in JRPGs. But like, again, this is much more pared down, much more simple. They're going to allow you to do that. They do allow you to really break things and like make things really easy. For example, the Lava Land boss with the Fire Piranha Plant, I had equipped the reduce fire damage badge and the ice damage badge, which meant that I was taking less damage from the Piranha Plant, and every time I jumped on the Piranha Plant, I would automatically get rid of the fire with those ice boots. And that was really helpful. And it made not necessarily a joke of that boss, but it made it was satisfying, because I had thought of all the ways in which I could approach this and had set myself up in a way to have success, and it was satisfying to have that success because of the way I'd chosen my badges and swapped them out and you know, decided upon which partner character I was going to use and that type of thing. I thought that was really good. Overall.
But generally, I do think this is still one RPG with RPG mechanics, and there is progression, and that is definitely something I'm in favor of in this style of game. In that sense, like, you still feel that progression,
right? Even if it doesn't make that much of a difference in the grand scheme of things, the simple idea, like, people like numbers going up, right? And I think there is a satisfaction of like, oh yes, I got a level up. And I also want to talk about, every time you level up, the hardest decision in the game has to be made. PR Billy says, my friends and I did a Let's Play of the original Paper Mario last year. The HP/FP/BP debate happened all the time. I always wanted FP for all the cool character moves. One of my friends always wanted BP so we could have all the badges on. And the final person picked HP because no one else would, and our health was really low. And Jackpot also says, one of the strongest aspects of Paper Mario in my eyes is the level up system. The choice between HP, FP, and BP works for both new players and those returning to the game. Replaying the game and pumping extra points into BP can make some fun combat variation, while also adding the extra challenge of having a lower HP pool. The unique level up system also carries over Mario's partners. Deciding which partner to upgrade upon finding a super block can be a difficult decision at times. Each partner really does have their use. And yeah, we haven't talked about upgrading the partners, but that was definitely tricky. And I didn't get every partner ultra ranked, which is like upgrading them twice. I think Gumbario and Bombette, I didn't get their final one, but everyone else I did get to the max. But this is something that I was definitely in favor of, and I think is the smartest thing about the way this game treats reward for level up. Is it's a really hard choice every level up, and I would say less so in the later part of the game. Maybe like around chapter 6, I was like, okay, well, I've got enough stuff. Like, I'm getting through this game fine. I don't need any more of this necessarily, but it would be nice to have more HP, so sure, I'll go with that one this time. But at the beginning of the game, when you have such limited pools for all of these abilities, it's really hard to decide, especially because you are getting quite a lot of badges early on that have a high amount of slots you need to use, but really limited. And because BP only goes up at 3 per time versus 5 per time for the other two, it's definitely a challenge to decide, man, which way do I want to go here? And making that choice sometimes of like, man, I should get my HP up, but man, I want that BP, and that BP could really help me.
I agree it is difficult making the choice, but I would also side a bit with the service where I don't think he made this point in particular. But I don't actually think it makes a huge difference.
I don't know, man. I think at the beginning of the game, to me, it felt like it made a huge difference. Maybe it was just the way I was playing it, but I felt like I was really wanting to use my character's special abilities a bunch and was getting really frustrated that I had to, find FP healing items all the time, because when you have only 10 FP and one of your moves uses 3, you can only do that for a couple of battles and then you're out of it, right? So for me in particular, I found it at the beginning of the game was a resource-wise was a lot more interesting of a choice, because I was like, man, I need this, but I should really take that,
Did you ever bump into the character where he randomly reallocates all your meters?
I did. I went to him and I was like, this guy seems fucking sketch. I'm going to Google him. And I Googled him, and what I Googled was bad.
Boring. You got to gamble. You just got to go for it.
No, absolutely not.
Because I went for it, did the thing, he reallocated all of them. I was like, crap, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And I just lived with it. I played on with it.
Damn,
because I honestly think, like, in my opinion, badges are the most important, and because they give you flexibility, because there are loads of badges, multiple badges that can improve both your FP and your health. So
in different ways as well, yeah.
In different ways. You can get the one that just increases the amount of health, like you would just increase your health normally from a level up. You can get one that will give you health back during battle, and then you can equip something that will give you more likelihood of getting more health after a battle. So you can just do all these things that boost it. So generally, I think the badges are the most important, because they give you the most flexibility to change it up depending on the situation, which is ultimately what you need the most in an RPG.
Yeah, I think it's no coincidence that both of us maxed out BP in the level up, right? Because especially there are certain badges, like I couldn't live without the 6-slot badge that increases your defense by 1, right?
Me too. Yeah.
That is so clutch. It's so important and makes things so much easier, especially if you have trouble with some of the timing, which is another aspect of the battle system that we haven't really touched on yet. But the thing that kind of sets these Mario RPGs apart from your regular JRPG fare is that you have a bit of active participation in the fights themselves, and this comes to hitting enemies, and it also comes to defending from enemies. So, if an enemy is going to attack you, there is a timing window in which you can press the A button and defend yourself to either take less damage or in some cases no damage, depending on how much they do. And the same is true of attacks. So, each attack has a different input to it. The jump is the simplest one, where you just press it right before you hit them, and then you have the hammer, which you pull it back, and each partner character has their own ones. I mentioned already Sushi's tidal wave, which is a bit of a nightmare. I think someone made a comment about it, but having the C stick as one of the inputs for that was a bad choice. I don't know why you made that a choice. I had this weird setup where one of my fingers would hover over the top of the analog stick on the Wii U gamepad when I was using that attack, and then my thumb was on the A and B buttons. It was like a weird claw grip type thing, but every time I did that, I had to do it so that I got the maximum possible damage with because reaction times on that is really tricky. One of the other things as well, the Wii U analog stick, really bad for, you use the C stick on the left hand side to choose your partner character, and you use it down to use their special ability outside of battle. So many times I tried to press down and it went left instead, because we don't have the little notches like we did on the GameCube. Bring back notches, that's what I say. Come on, Nintendo, Switch Pro, give us some notches.
The Switch Joy-Con has notches.
Yeah, but not embedded in the same way as they were on GameCube. You know what I mean? The little corners that they go into. So I think N64
I solved one of our big issues.
Okay.
So there's 3 upgrades to jump in this game, I believe. You got your initial jump, middle jump, and then the spin jump at the end. So the initial jump, when you're given the multi-jump badge, so this is the ability to jump across enemies, and if you time it, you can keep jumping across all the enemies, doing damage to all of them. So when you upgrade your jump, it then becomes a ground pound jump. And we had the issue that when you try and do the multi-bounce jump, after the ground pound, it's impossible to time it and continue the jump line.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you upgrade your jump a second time to the spin jump, all of a sudden I got the timing back and I was able to twirl myself across and use the multi-jump using the spin jump. So I have a feeling you just cannot use it for the middle stage of that scenario. You have to have the second evolution, as it were, of the jump, where you have the spin jump.
So I'm here to bust your theory because I actually made it work with the ground pound jump.
Damn.
It's just a different timing. The timing is different. And I didn't use it for multi-bounce. I used it for the power jump, which is the one where you keep jumping on an enemy's head non-stop if you get the timing correct. You basically just have to time it when he's in the air with his butt like about to come down. That's when you press it and it works. And you just need to do the timing, really. That's all it is. And it's tricky.
And does he do another ground pound over and over again?
I think he does a ground pound over and over again. Yeah, and it's tricky timing, but it does work, and it is possible to do it. I think we just hadn't figured out what the timing was, but I did manage to get it down right before getting the spin jump. So
and generally the timing with this game, like I think for boosting attacks and defending, you can play the whole game without doing any of that stuff. It's just like these little bonuses that over 20 hours of gameplay, you will be saving yourself so much damage by defending properly and doing so much more damage by attacking properly. It's one of those things where it's just like a nice little bonus that isn't a fundamental mechanic of the game. And for the first 3 hours of the game, I thought this game didn't even have... I was worried it didn't have the action mechanics because I knew it was a sort of staple of the Mario and Luigi and the Paper Mario series. So I was a bit bummed.
That's kind of what I was talking about with Box Boy last time on the show. Of like, I know how to do this kind of hook jump. Let me do it, Box Boy. But it doesn't give you it doesn't let you do it until it gives you the mechanic. Even though, as a Paper Mario person who has played other games in the series and knows what this game is about, even though I knew I could do the timing, I was trying to do the timing, and I was like, why isn't it working? And it doesn't work because they don't let it work until they teach you about it.
And it's quite a long way into the game before you learn it. I think it's middle of the actual first dungeon. So you have like a sort of pre-dungeon, well, it's not a dungeon, the pre-area, warm-up area, and then you experience Toad Town, and then you go to the first dungeon, and it's the middle of that first dungeon. So it takes a while.
It does. But I think I disagree with you in terms of like it's not fundamental. I think it really is fundamental, especially the amount of damage you do, right? Like we're talking double damage here. If Mario misses that second jump, you're like missing out on a lot. And I think that defending can be super important in terms of there's a certain badge I use that reduced the amount of damage if you nail the timing to the point where things that did 2 damage would do 0 to me. And I think mainly where that comes to factor is survivability, and you know that works both ways, right? Because if you're killing enemies faster, they have less chance to do damage to you, and if you're defending more, they do less damage to you. So it's all about how much you can take before you get to a place where you can heal, or how much you rely on items and how much you use items. Something that I didn't realize until that stream, that you can use items outside of battle, which that would have been helpful, I think, early on in the game.
It's clunky because you go to the menu, click an item, and you can't use it from the menu. It does feel weird. It's a separate menu.
You have to use the C stick to open it up to then use it outside of battle, which they probably did teach you that at the beginning, but I forgot it.
So you think it is fundamental to the game that you have to...
I think that you will have a much harder time in this game if you just ignore the timing stuff, right?
I'd say harder. I wouldn't say much harder.
I don't know, man. Some of those attacks that you take, the amount of damage, if you're thinking about the amount of damage you take, like for those Shy Guys with the spears, for example, right? Like if you get hit by if you're fighting 4 of those guys and you get hit by them every time, that could add up to, say, 3 times 4 damage, right? Versus, doing the defense every time and reducing it. And if you have that badge on, you're reducing it by a huge amount. Like that 3 goes down to a 1. That's like 4 versus 12 damage. That's a massive difference.
I do agree, but by that point in the game, you're on like probably about 35 HP. You probably have like a defense badge. You probably have like these other things that I do think just massively mitigate the point of action moves. Where I agree it makes a difference, but I just don't think it makes such a big difference that like, you can't do it without it.
I'd be interested to see if there's a playthrough out there of someone playing the entire game without using any inputs. Right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think you need inputs to get out some of the bonus characters' moves full stop.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's where action moves are the most important. But when it comes down to Mario himself getting bonus damage on attacks and bonus defense on defense, I think that's where it's less important.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to disagree, but that's fine. I think it's really crucial to just survive a lot of the time. But anyway, Let's bring this comment from Rachel about the battle system. She says, the meat and potatoes of the game, though, is of course the battles. I'm quite surprised how fun these can be for as deceptively simple as the mechanics are. There's nothing complicated about any individual action, but by the time you've got a jump, the hammer, various items, star powers, badge moves, super and ultra companion moves, and action commands, there's a lot of variety and possibility for strategy that I wouldn't have otherwise expected. The different enemy design then adds to that, as what would have worked on one might not on the next. I mean, you can't just use the same attacks every time. The game encourages you to try things out. Playing on Wii U, I've been surprised at the number of times I've created a restore point at the beginning of a battle just to try out a new badge, move, or try using a star power more strategically, and then reloading if it fails. Sure, I can't imagine it's the most complex battle system as far as RPGs go, but it's far from baby's first RPG either. It's much, much more compelling than the battle systems in recent Paper Mario games, but between companions and different moves also gives a better variety of action commands than the Mario and Luigi games, which otherwise just rely on pressing A and B at the right moment. And yeah, I definitely think it's overall a relatively easy game, but I do think it's much more challenging than I expected it to be, you know? There are fights in there that will, out of nowhere, be like, okay, this guy does 8 damage to you. Like, oh, shit, okay. I definitely need to be paying attention.
If you don't play your moves right, the game will cream you, definitely. And I think that is the sign that it's a strong RPG. Like, you do need to be... The game is very good at teaching you new mechanics strategically and systematically quite slowly throughout the game. But then the game does ask you, right, you need to put all these together. How are you going to defend yourself the best? How are you going to do the maximum amount of damage? And how are you going to essentially is survivability and managing those 3 meters? And I do think, it's not the hardest of RPGs, but I definitely don't think it's an easy RPG. It's definitely like middle of the pack for me.
I think it's really nicely balanced, right? Like, I just think
it's really well balanced, very well balanced.
It feels enjoyable, and I was never...
Nothing feels unfair.
No,
and I hate that about some RPGs.
Yeah, for sure.
I made a slight wrong move, and that enemy just creams me.
I would say the only places where it can feel not unfair, but really hard to understand what you're supposed to do are certain enemy attacks, right? My least favorite enemy in the game are those little fucking flower guys in the flower field. The worst part... Okay, so here's the thing that they piss me off in many ways. Number one, they take fucking forever to do their animation. They skip along at the slowest pace possible, just like skippity, skippity, until they get right to the point where they attack Mario. And then their attack is just a bunch of music notes with no indication of when you're supposed to, like...
Yeah, I never defended any of that.
Oh my god! They fucking sucked. So, like, there are some enemy designs, like, the fuzzies are really hard to predict because they, like, latch onto you and start sucking you, and then you have to press, like, a specific time, but it's no indication of, like, when that time is, and it just takes a lot of trial and error to figure out when the timing is, versus, like, you know, a shy guy who throws a spear at you, and it's like, oh, that's way easier to predict than some of these other ones.
Yeah.
There are certain moves that really... Oh, those flower skippy guys sucked.
Slight Joseph Anderson criticism here, but generally there are just quite a few animations that just take a little bit too long occasionally, that you're using frequently, that when you're having just in hundreds of battles throughout the game, you just think, God, this is taking a lot of time. Like when you
every time you use a star move, like summoning the star type of deal.
Some of those star moves are very slow, but that's just, I think loads of RPGs are guilty of that, honestly.
It's nitpicky, but I think, you know, it would be nice to be able to skip some of those animations if you wanted to.
I think the greater a game is, the more nitpicky I think we both get, honestly, and that's a sign of a good game, a very strong game.
For sure, that's definitely true. Cool. Well, do we have anything else to say about the battle system itself and the various intricacies? I feel like we've covered a lot.
It's unique. I love it, and I'm worried that I'm now like aligning myself with the tribe of we need some battle mechanics and RPG mechanics in Paper Mario games. It's really interesting because I think when I played Bug Fables as well, I was caught off guard by the fact that it's not actually that complicated at all, and it's super simple, but despite the fact that it really is that way, it does have like a bit of hidden depth to it, this type of combat, that I don't think is that apparent to some people from the outside, right? Like when you look at it, it's like when you level up, all you do is choose one of these 3 things to do, and I think that is
mischaracterizing the depth that the game actually has within its combat.
But most RPGs, you don't even get a choice when you level up. You just get a bit of HP,
you just get
a bit
numbers,
of FP equivalent magic or whatever.
Unless, of course, you're EV training and specifically targeting what numbers are going to go up, in that case.
True. But yeah, you just get a bit of everything and you're more powerful generally. And you can claim with this game, you're not more powerful generally. You have invested in something. And as we've said, there's other ways you can become more powerful in this game. But yeah.
Totally. I want to talk about the chapters as a whole and like them as individual parts of this game. Did you have a favorite chapter, Bally? Do you have a least favorite? And kind of what were the things within a chapter that made it a good one for you as an overall kind of package?
My favorite chapter was chapter 5, Mount to Lava.
Nice.
I think that the setting of like this pseudo Yoshi's Island, which I'm just going to say that is Yoshi's Island, right? Like
I
that's
guess
like a
maybe
cool feature to be like, right, we're in the Mushroom Kingdom. We've already had this game Yoshi's Island. We're going to make a tropical island with multicolored Yoshis. And then we're gonna have these 5 little Yoshis that all escape, and they've got their babysitter, and you got some like water mechanics with sushi, and then you go into like this volcano, and there's lava, and you've got the exploring Koopa. What's his name? Koopa Colorado we just talked about. So like I like that all comes together, and I like that tree you go up with the that's like the final boss from Yoshi's
with the
Island
ravens.
is the crow.
Raphael, right? The Raphael
the crow, yeah. So like I love that it references, like I love Yoshi's Island. I love that it references all that stuff. And then it's just a really nice tropical setting. I don't think it's not a very difficult area of the game. I felt very on top of the mechanics at that point in time. And I just love the final boss with like the lava piranha plant. I think all that stuff, really, really strong design. And I love the setting, the idea that it is this island and that you do get like the whale fish thing, you sail over to it. I love that idea. It's very Pokemon.
Yeah, totally. There's a couple of moments that felt Pokemon with the train going across the screen, both in the toy box and in the overworld one, as well as that kind of whale. It's like, it reminds me of the gold and silver train that takes you from Goldenrod to...
Totally. And it's just an artificial way of making the world feel bigger, but
connected, right?
And connected, and it works, and I like that.
Yeah, for sure. My biggest beef with Chapter 5 is the end when my Wii U gamepad was like having an aneurysm. It was just like fucking, like the rumbling that was going on was so fucking loud. I was like, Jesus, man, I forgot that the Wii U gamepad rumble can be this obnoxiously loud, because it's just like...
I think I had my rumble off the whole game, honestly.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. I agree. I really dislike the Wii U gamepad rumble. I think I turned it off because of playing Mario Kart with Caroline, honestly. I think it was just miserable, so yeah.
It's so loud, like, because it overrode the volume, because I was playing just handheld, and I was like, had the volume on, and it just like overrode it so hard that I could barely hear what was going on in the game. I was like, this is absurd, man. And they haven't done a great job of that with the Joy-Cons either. I feel like Nintendo needs to go back to the rumble, to take a book out of a leaf out of Sony's book at this point in time, right?
Oh my god, that DualSense rumble is something to behold.
Yeah, so I think I like that chapter a lot. It's a really good one. I think finding the Yoshis can be a little annoying, going through those screens, like that kind of...
I think I need a guide for like the last 2 or last 1 or something.
Yeah,
like,
no, I don't think I actually went to a guide to find that much stuff in this game. There's the toy box thing that obviously you helped me out with on stream that was a little bit annoying, but I would say my favorite is actually Chapter 7, the Frost area, because you have that unique murder mystery solving part of it. You then have kind of a small section where there's not too many enemies going through, and you get to the village, and you do the little puzzle with the snowmen, and that dungeon is probably the best dungeon in the game, I think, in terms of its puzzle design and in terms of its length. Like, it's not overly long, but it still has a good kind of length to it. The kind of mirroring stuff that you go back and forward with, and then the boss is really challenging. It was probably the first super challenging boss in the game for me, in terms of I have to really use a bunch of items here and figure this out, because it heals and it has a bunch of moves that it does to you, and it freezes Mario, which was a real pain in the ass.
My turtling strategy worked really well on that guy.
I'm sure,
because he was healing a lot, but yeah,
totally. So I think overall that one, I love the setting. The music was really nice there as well, very chill and cool vibes. But other than that, chapter 3 I loved, which is weird again because we don't like haunted mansion places, but I think that's one of the coolest areas in the game. It's one of my favorite like haunted houses.
You're not fighting anything in the mansion, you're just exploring, and I love that about it. The game does a really good job of saying like, this is a combat area, this is a non-combat area, and a bit like that murder mystery area. You're not doing, how much of a drag would that murder mystery area have been if you were constantly going in and out of battles, but like middle of it. The same with that Boo Mansion. Like the game deciding to be like, right, this is a non-combat area, I think is something more RPGs should give a go.
Yeah, totally. I really do like that. It's this kind of bastion of safety of like, okay, I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. I'm just focusing on the atmosphere and the world building and all that stuff going on here. And I like how when you go down to the shop, the guy's like, I don't sell you shit. You're not a boo. Get out of here. And then you come back with Bo later on. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to sell you stuff now. So yeah, that's neat. And it's this cool idea of you think that you're building towards a boo that you're going to fight, and that's going to be the chapter in some ways. If you've maybe forgotten about the Tub of Blubber thing, maybe you don't know who Tub of Blubber is. Maybe it is in the Boo's Mansion, but then it's revealed that, oh no, it's this other character, and then she becomes a partner character with you.
Your boss is in another castle.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then you go to another area, past these windmills and stuff, where you fight Tub of Blubber I really love that entire sequence of, sneaking. He's like walking through the corridor and you have to use Bo to make yourself disappear so you don't get found by him. You go to his giant bed and you find the stuff and you get the key to the area where you go in.
Did you sneak past all his enemies or did you just fight them?
I think I fought most of them just to get the XP.
I fought them as well because I hate the idea of missing out on XP, back to Cyrus's point. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to fight. And they did a lot of damage. Like they were hard-hitting enemies for that early in the game. And
I think those enemies were really tricky to get the timing down. I think they were the big guys with the spikes. And eventually, like by the end of the chapter, I got the timing. That tended to happen a lot. Was like by the end of the chapter, I got it down, and then they disappeared. And, later on, they do come out with different versions of those types of enemies. So it is good to still have that muscle memory built for the later parts of the game. But yeah, totally was a case of getting hit around a bunch and hoping to find a heart block. But that entire chapter 3 was also really, really good and delightful. And I actually also I think Jackpot mentioned that chapter 1 was one of his favorites. I kind of like that as well because the dungeon in chapter 1 feels like the perfect length of like really nicely designed small area, bite size kind of. Really
just minor puzzles here and there. It's not completely linear, but it's just like a little thing. And I do think the dungeons in the whole game, apart from the final dungeon, were actually all a really good length, honestly.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And what did you think of using abilities outside of battle? Because this is a thing that I think is not that much talked about, but there's certain RPGs that do it. Golden Sun is a good example of a game that kind of has abilities that you use outside of battle.
I love it because essentially your characters are both characters that you interact with. They're story related. They're also in battle accomplices, and then outside of battle they're also HMs basically. Like I think it's great that they roll all three of those together. Where it's clearly just taking ideas from other RPGs, a bit like Pokemon with HMs, and just kind of putting them together. I think it works really well. And sure, you have to switch between them, but like it's. Honestly, for a 2001 game, it's still not that clunky.
No, it's not that clunky. I think I was just being a little bit like forgetful sometimes of Goombario and that type of thing. But I didn't have that much of an issue with it. And I think most of the time it's very self-explanatory. It's like, oh, that's far away, use Koopa to get it. Or I need to go across this gap, so I need to use Parakarry. Or there's
flick
water.
A switch with Koopa and
yes.
It's good stuff.
It's super self-explanatory for the most part. But there are moments of like, there was that one point in the toy box where I was like, oh, this is great. What do I do here? And then chat was like, ghost. And I was like, use Bo, go become a ghost, and then automatically will phase through the grate because you're on a moving platform. That was clever. Like that sort of stuff. They do a little bit more of that stuff in the later game in some of those dungeons as well. And I think that is good. It makes sense. And it just adds a nice little flavor to the exploration side of it, right? And there's often times where they'll show an item and you won't be able to get it, and it's you will know that there will be a character you will find in this chapter that then will allow you to get through that area or do that type of thing. So Yeah, really good stuff when it comes to the characters. Any other aspects that we want to dig into? We didn't talk about our least favorite chapters. I think we've talked about enough that the toy box was just not very good overall.
It doesn't delineate between a build up and a dungeon. It's just all kind of mixed together, and I don't much like that. I love the theming of it. The toy box is a fun theme. I think the final boss is really fun. Like it's like this. He almost looks like a kind of little. He's in like a little dictator kind of outfit. The shy guy, where
he's like a general commanding his
general
troops.
with the white hat, which I think is based on. I want to say Muammar Gaddafi wore like a white general suit when he was leader of Libya, but yeah, which is really fun. And he sends these different waves of shy guys. That's all fun. But yeah, the build up, the build up's not great. And sure, what is fun, and that's fine. And with the Flash backing up my HM theory.
But you get what right at the end, and you don't use what at all throughout that chapter. The most you use what is later in the game under Bowser's castle in the catacombs. That's kind of.
And I like the puzzle of who wanted this cookbook to make the thing, but the actual process of backtracking and doing it is not much fun. So like I was saying before, I like the idea of these puzzles, but it needs to be a bit more compact or a quicker way of getting between the points, and the reward for using that logic doesn't feel great because it's just a long way to go outside the toy box, go back, get the cookbook, get the cake, go back in. It's just kind of a little bit slow paced.
And I'm definitely why I was using the speedy spin badge throughout the entire game. Speedy spin plus jump is the fastest way to get around everywhere in this game. It really,
because the movement generally in the game is actually very slow. Which I'm surprised you haven't mentioned yet. Besides, who doesn't like slow movement in game? Yeah,
I think the reason is because from the very beginning, I think let's see, what number note is this? I think this is my third note I wrote on the game, and I have 40, 50, 60 notes on this game. The third one I wrote was, Mario's spin helps with speed getting around. Figured out that you can jump at the end of the spin to cancel the lag. Feels like a speedrunning tactic. And I think that shows that I figured that out within the first hour of the game, and then I never had an issue with moving around again, because literally it was muscle memory. Tap the shoulder button to spin, tap the jump button to jump, and I just got around the speed that I wanted to get around. Because if you're just walking, you're doing it wrong, is what I'm going to say with this game. It's too slow for me in terms of the regular walking speed.
Lucky Lester at the end actually feels a bit like a run button, but you don't get him until chapter 6.
Exactly, yeah, I was feeling that. I was like, oh shit, maybe I should just be in this cloud the whole time. But yeah, I got so used to spin jump that I just didn't really worry about it. It was a good way to get around. And yeah, that toy box area definitely has the issue of, what am I supposed to do next kind of thing, alongside the backtracking nature of it. Although, shout out to Tasty, the cooking toad in her house. She... Obviously, there's an entire wiki you can go on and find every single recipe you can possibly get from giving all the possible ingredients to her. And by the end of the game, I had... so there's this one item that we haven't talked about yet called Whacker's Bump. And Whacker's Bump is one of the most OP items in the game, and there are limited numbers of them. You find this guy called Whacker, who's kind of like a mole a mole from one of those games where you whack a mole type of things. And you can whack him with your hammer, and when you whack him, he gets a bump on his head, and then it falls off, and you take it as an item that you then eat, apparently. This is a fucked up world. Mario whacking this guy on the head, giving a bump, and then that bump you eat for sustenance. I don't know what that says about...
what even is a bump? What is a bump?
It's like I've got a giant bump on my head from when I was 4 years old, and I ran into the door trying to steal sweets from my mum.
Just eat your bump.
Eat your bump, apparently. So Mario just fucking cannibalism here. Although I guess it isn't cannibalism because it's not the same species as a mole. I don't know. We can't get into a deep dive on the fucking species of the Mushroom Kingdom today. But that item is very, very good, and it gives you 25 HP, 25 FP, which at the beginning of the game, you're like, I don't even have that much of either of these, so that's overkill, it feels like. But I went back, you can farm him, and you can do it 8 times, so you have a limit of 8 of these throughout the game. And I made sure I had at least 1 or 2 with me every chapter I went into, and I'd use them maybe 4 or 5 throughout the game.
And can you cook Whacker's Bump with Tasty?
Yes, so I experimented on this a little bit. I actually had to reload a save state that was quite a bit back because I fucked up one of my Whacker's Bumps. I'm like, I can't have a fuck. I got a bad recipe, which is actually something, in Breath of the Wild, how you have a bad recipe and it's all pixelated out and it's like, this is disgusting. That's what you get if you fuck up a recipe with Tasty.
Right.
If you give her something and so if you cook Whacker's Bump on its own, it will give you a disgusting meal that heals 1 FP and 1 HP, which sucks. So you can fuse it with, I believe, I can't remember what it is now. There's an item that you can fuse it with where it turns it into what is called a deluxe feast. And so if you fuse that, you get 40 HP and 40 FP. So it bumps it even more. And then there was another item where if you took the jam and jelly, which gives you 50 FP, and you fused it with the ultra mushroom, which gives you 50 HP, you get the jelly ultra, which is 100 HP and 100 FP, way beyond what anyone will have in the whole of this game. But I still had it, and I never ended up using it. I had it in the final boss fight, didn't need to use it. So again, this is we're talking about this a lot, about how my use of items and the way I've been conditioned with RPGs to like hang on to things. And I was glad I hung on to them, because by the end of the final boss fight, you were sitting there turtling because you didn't have enough items yet left.
I mean, I was turtling from the off of that match.
Okay, fair enough. But like, I had all the items, and I had I wasn't scared of that fight at all, because I had any ability to get myself back up to full, like 5 different ways. So I always like having that safety blanket. That's just the kind of thing that I want to have with an RPG. So it's always good when that is possible. So, cool. Aside from the Toy Box one, we haven't really talked about some of the other. Flower Fields is one that's a little bit, backtracky. Again, we talked about and mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah. And that, again, it's a bit like Toy Box. It doesn't feel very dungeon-like. It's very much build up and final dungeon in the same kind of world, which is the best.
I really like the way that area changes musically. We haven't really talked about the music so far in the game, but we have a comment on the music from Rachel, who said, maybe I've been spoilt by the live big band recordings that make up every Mario soundtrack these days, but I've not found any of the music thus far to be all too memorable. I would go as far to say as I don't want to hear the main battle theme ever again. When she says like main battle theme, it instantly pops into my head, right? Like, I've heard it so many times now that it's just like playing in the background now.
And is it just one theme for the whole game in the battle?
I think,
I don't
know. I think some boss battles are different, and I think there's some
right,
variation to it, but it's pretty similar.
That's crazy.
She continues saying, if you told me it had been rejected from Super Mario Kart on Super Nintendo, I'd have believed you in just how limited the sound is compared to the game it's in. Of course, I prefer bad music in a good game than the other way around, but it's perhaps an argument for either a remake of this game or a return to the series, more of this style of game with modern sounds and visuals. I don't think the music stood out to me necessarily as a thing. What did you feel about the soundtrack overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both agreed on one of the tracks in particular, which we can get to, but generally I agree. I don't think it stands out a ton, but certainly not bad. And I do agree that we've kind of been blessed with Mario music in the last few, I'd say on from all the 3D Mario games, but I'd say on from certainly the Galaxy games, especially like Odyssey and 3D World have just kill ass soundtracks. They are so good. Like I think that helps
that everything from Galaxy onwards has been orchestrated, right?
And that also helps a ton. So it's a big step down from all that, but it's fine.
Yeah. The point I was going to make about the music is in that Flower Fields area, you have the Bulborb guys, which it's another part of that chapter, which isn't part of the chapter, but is before the chapter, is having to find all the Bulborb guys, which is like, this is my least favorite thing in a game.
Get
where
the 4
it's like,
seeds.
I thought at the beginning, this garden thing is nice. It seems optional. I probably won't do it.
That's what I thought. How many did you still need to get?
Only 2, because
I was 2 as well. Yeah, one was on Yoshi's Island, and the other one was in the Boo House, I believe. I can't remember.
Okay. Yes. My ones it was the Boo area where it was hidden in the forest, the Forever Forest.
Oh, wait, no, it was the mountain. Sorry, I had to go up the mountain.
Oh, so you found one in the Forever Forest then?
I did, yeah.
That's lucky, because that place is a nightmare to navigate, so that sucked. I had to use a video to find that.
You can warp to it, though.
Yeah, you can warp to it, but you still have to navigate the particular part of the forest where he is in. He's in
right, got you.
the fourth section,
I
so
hate
you have
that
to.
Forest. It's not great.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked going through it once. That was fine. But having to go back to explore it.
Yeah,
ugh.
once, but then having to backtrack through Lost Woods essentially is not much fun. But yeah.
I got the chest on the island before I left Chapter 5, so I
nice.
had Colorado come back with me, so I went and found that, because I saw where it had landed. I was like, oh, I know where that is. I'd been there before, so I found that one, but it was that one, and then I can't remember which other one it was, but yeah, having to go out and find those was a little annoying. But back to the point I was trying to make, these Bulb guys are very like, oh, I'm a little bit, I'm like, they, to me, they don't have voices, obviously, but they read as like, this would be my voice, I'm a Bulb guy. And the way that the music matches that is like very low trombone kind of music,
right. Yeah,
like very boom, boom, boom type of thing. And then at the end of the chapter, the music like brightens a lot because the sun comes out and the clouds are gone, and so it still has those kind of little low trombone-y elements to it, which is like imitating the characters of this area, which I thought was really cool as a musical reflection of the space, you know.
That is cool.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, shout outs to the Bowser's theme that plays when
I love it. So good.
Whenever he appears.
It's usually when you're coming back to the castle, and I think later on it usually is Peach's theme that plays because you go straight to Peach. But
yes.
The first couple of chapters, it always starts off with someone reporting to Bowser, Mario has defeated this guy, and it comes in with a ba 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 ba. I can't do it vocally. It's very hard for me to vocalize what it sounds like. Yeah. Maybe I'll play it in the background here as we're talking about it. But yes. I love that music. It has an almost like, I don't know how to describe it, but like there's a kind of almost Japanese vibe to it in some senses, like the way that it's orchestrated.
It's slow but still metally. Like it's still heavy.
That's a good way of describing it, actually. Yeah, for sure. It has a great theme to it, and I really like those little trills that it has throughout that little piece of the music. But yeah, that's probably my favorite musical track, would be that Bowser's theme. Cool. Any other aspects do you have, like little things, Bally, that we haven't talked about yet? Little things that you made notes about, or elements that you wanted to bring up?
Is that Star Rod that they all are fighting over? Is that the Star Rod that you use in Smash Brothers?
I don't think so. I believe the Star Rod originates in Kirby, and so the Star Rod from Kirby is different from the Star Rod in this game. This is a invention for the Mario universe, I believe. Right.
And then here's my fun fact that I've been building up for a fortnight.
Finally coming to the fun fact at the end of the day.
But I'll change it into a quiz for you, MBZ.
Okay.
Where have the Star Spirits appeared in another Mario game?
Oh, that's interesting.
Did you know they appeared in another Mario game? Do they look familiar to you?
I mean, like, this idea, as we mentioned before, of like 7 sages or whatever, like, it's a familiar idea throughout Nintendo games, right? Zelda series. But the actual stars themselves, I'm trying to, like, when I think about recurring characters, I always think about the Koopa kids as well, as like there's 7 or 8 of them or whatever, and they come back all the time. But another game where these stars specifically are, it would have to be something that comes after this. And I don't know. Yeah, nothing's coming to mind for me.
These Star Spirits represent each mode in Mario Party 5.
Oh wow! Yeah, okay,
which is very strange. Because I thought that was the first time they appeared in anything was in Mario Party 5. So when I saw them all in this game, I was like, they look really familiar. What's going on? And yeah, because I played a lot of Mario Party 5 at university. It was like our go-to Mario Party at that point in time. So yeah,
that makes sense.
Very fond of that game.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool that they have taken something from this game and you know, expanded on them. There are some characters though, like the guys who run the shop. I don't know what they are. They're like dog people or something.
Yeah,
the dad and his kid who run the bad shop. And like, have we seen them in a Mario game before or since? I don't know. And I think they might be in Thousand Year Door, but I don't know what characters or what species they are, and I never really looked it up. Maybe I probably should and figure that out. But yeah, that was always something throughout the game I was a bit curious about and didn't know what was going on. The letter quest, we haven't really talked about that, but there's the kind of Link's Awakening side quest in this game where you take letters from one person to another. I think this got a lot easier because of the other thing we haven't talked about, the fast travel in this game, the sewer section. The sewer is almost a 9th dungeon in this game in many ways. It's a kind of like I would say, Spirit Tracks-esque thing that you keep going back to as you get more power-ups, and your hammer evolves and you can break through more blocks and fight more bigger bloopers as you go throughout it.
It's sort of like big mini bosses.
Yeah, so it's like it's a dungeon that you keep going back to that also has warp pipes that take you to different parts of the world, which for me was a revelation, because at the beginning of the game I was like, I'm going to do this letter quest, so I went all the way back through to Goomba Village.
Yeah, I did. That's most of my playtime in this game, I would say, is the letter quests, backtracking on trains and sailing and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. It was much easier when I found that part and unlocked it and was able to warp about, and it made the letter quest much more simple. And you get a prize for that, which was neat, but then I realized, this is ridiculous, because it's a badge that costs 7 to use. But
I mean, so it's called like the lucky badge, and it means that occasionally you get lucky and dodge an enemy's attack. When I equipped it, I swear I'd maybe dodge one attack in about 10 attacks on average. Like, it just did not feel worth it in the slightest. So considering it's like a 15-person trail of different people to deliver letters to, more or less, like it's I would highly recommend dodging that one if you are new to this game.
Well, for me this is a case of journey before destination, right? Like, this is a I enjoyed the little kind of, the dialogue is great, and I think the writing is really strong.
They're all part of like a fishing group or something.
Yeah, totally. And I did enjoy the little narrative of it as I went through, and so I was perfectly happy to do it. I was like, it's like kind of ticking off a list, right? Of like, I just want to deliver all these and get them all around the place. And even though the reward wasn't great, I still had enjoyed having strung it along just to see all that stuff, and I thought it was worth doing just for that, so I was fine with it. Did you ever discover, Bally, and I know that there is a badge for this, which kind of shows you like secrets of like, there's a star shard in this area. Did you ever learn that if you ground pound in certain sections of this game, there are just hidden star shards all over the fucking place?
Really? Okay, that's something I did wonder, because I thought the prices of the badges, but you could trade star shards for, I thought, how are there this many star shards in the game? I assumed there were that many, so I did think there was some other way of getting lots of star shards. I actually thought it was going to link to a guy who's in the sewers, and you can pay like 64
coins
64 coins,
yes.
Good number, a pop, and he'll give you like a random item, and one of those items is frequently a star shard. So I got quite a few through that guy.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I assumed that he was potentially limitless on star shards, but that is interesting to know that you get them elsewhere. So so
because I looked this up. Basically, I entered, so every time you enter an area, it will pop up with a little blinking star thing, and I entered the area right before you go to the place where you trade them in with the star guy in the house, where you get the really good badges, like the one that is heals your FP and HP in battle, which are ones that I equipped very early on and stayed with for the rest of the game. But
did you have one of each, by the way? Because I had 2 HP and 1 FP.
I had one of each, yeah, and I didn't realize if it would like stack, like if you +2 if you had 2 of them equipped.
Yeah, it does apparently. I don't know if there's 2 for FP as well as HP, but that would also.
Yeah, I think there are, because you can buy one and you can find one in the overworld, I believe.
Okay, right.
Or FP Saver, which was my favorite badge, which cost 6 to equip, but reduced the amount of FP on any attack you do, which was
by 1 or
by 1.
Okay.
So like, the really expensive ones and even the cheap ones, like the one that costs 3 goes down to 2 every time, and that's an extra usage really every single fight. So that was really, really good. But there's a section before you get there which is just this entire blank area with nothing in it, but it kept pinging me that there was a star shard here. So I was like, right, how do I get this? I looked up online, and there's this entire wiki showing you areas in the game, like at least 40 areas, 40 screens where there are hidden star shards, where you literally ground pound the ground and this little square on the ground will just like rumble, and if you're close enough to it, it will flip over and it will flip out a star shard that was hidden underneath. And I don't know how people figured that out without having a guide.
So the thing that reveals it doesn't even tell you where it is, it just gives you a hint.
It just tells you there is one on this screen, and you basically, if you want to find it without a guide, have to go around this entire fucking screen, ground pounding everywhere to find this one square, which will flip over and give you a.
Well, I'm glad, like, more of the archaic design is behind the side stuff rather than like
and you don't
anything.
even need to engage it to get the badges you want, because you had all the badges you needed and you never engaged with that, right? So
yeah, I mean there were more I would have liked, but I got like there were 3 at the start of the game. I was like, it'd be really good to get those 3, and I did get them all by chapter 6 or 7. So yeah, totally
for
worth
sure. Yeah. Other little things. There's some nice original Mario Brothers references in this game. In the Boo Mansion, you can go into, I think it's a pipe, and it will turn you into 8-bit Mario, and you can just run around as 8-bit Mario in 2D.
Oh, jeez, I didn't do that.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's it changes the music as well to the World 1-1, I think, music of Mario Brothers. And you can't really do anything. You have to go back into the pipe to read.
God, Nintendo absolutely love Mario Brothers 1, don't they? It's just their absolute favorite
Think
game.
about it, man. Like, even today they're doing that. But this was year 2000 and they're doing nostalgia references to Mario 1 in this game. It's like, man. And then at the very end of the game, right before you fight Bowser, there's a section of the castle where you have to go up or down. And that, I believe, is a reference to the final level of Mario 1, where there are 3 paths you have to take, and you have to go up, down, middle, down.
Oh,
you have to choose,
fun. Cool.
You know, which one is the way to actually get to Bowser, and I believe that's a reference to that. So I thought that was really cool. A little neat thing that they were able to talk about.
So there's like a Lost Woods style section at the end of Mario Bros. 1.
Basically, like right before you fight Bowser in the very last level, 8-4, I believe.
How you meant to work that out back in 1987?
It was all like trial and error. You know, it was like, go down here. Does it take me back to the beginning? No, this is the right path. Go in the middle one. Does it take me back to the beginning? No.
Game design.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's kind of, that type of thing has become less prevalent, and even if it does exist, you know, the way it's done in Breath of the Wild is so clever. I love the way that's done, of like, you have the flame on your torch and the wind dictates which way you should go.
Really
like
cool.
Oh, beautiful. But this kind of still exists, but it's just become a lot better. We haven't talked about Quizmo, and I think for me this is like the photographer in Earthbound, right? Of like, this guy's never really explained. He just pops up and he's like, anyway, let's do a quiz. And it just goes into a game show, and then you answer a question, and if you get it right, you get a star piece. And that's kind of it.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I only got 1 wrong the whole time, and I never looked at any guide. Very proud of myself.
Good stuff. And they do a similar thing, of course, with the trivia section with Peach in the castle, which I really enjoyed.
Can you get anything from that, or is it just the umbrella you get? Because I think I came second or something.
Oh, yeah, if you win it, they do give you, I believe, a jam and jelly or something that you can give to Mario. Maybe it's a badge.
Right.
I think it was the Last Stand badge, actually, I got, or something like that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I do like that idea of Peach, like, helping Mario from afar, like, using Twink as an agent. We haven't talked about Twink either. Twink, the little star.
And the treasure chest she can put items in.
Yeah, so you can collect badges. There was one that I never got that I could see, you know, in the library section when you're stealthing through, that was very reminiscent of the Ocarina of Time sneaking past the castle guards section.
Right, and it's like up on a first floor.
Yes, up on a first floor, and I never figured out how to get that badge, and I don't know where I'd have to go to get that.
I have no idea.
Yes, you can collect the badges that you find in the castle and then put them in a box that then Mario collects from the Star House area. Which was great, and I thought that was a neat way of doing it, but also like having Twink as this go-between of like, anyway, Mario, here to update you, this is what's going on in the castle, and it was a nice way of having that communication between the two characters, and of course by the end Twink has his little moment of like, I'm gonna become Super Saiyan Twink and defeat you stupid kind of Koopa on a what's the Kami Koopa, I believe it is, on the broom. Who does the magic?
Yeah. Or Magic Koopa, Kami Koopa.
Kami Koopa, I think,
Kami
in this
Koopa
game.
is a Magic Koopa.
Is a Magic Koopa, yes. And you defeat her by using Twink. And again, it's kind of the Zelda role that Princess Peach plays in that final battle of she doesn't... I mean, Zelda's a bit more active, I would say, in like Wind Waker of helping you.
Yeah. Peach's phase in that battle is just a bit long, isn't it? And that you have to go through phases.
It breaks up the pace a little bit, and it's a little slow for my liking. It goes through a lot of segments.
We're playing
and it's very much a story battle. There's not much mechanics going on that you can interact with there. But I do like it. I like it as a way to nod to the fact that you're not just playing as Mario through this game, and it's not just Mario who has got to this point. It's Peach helping Mario to get to this point. So I like that they have her be as unactive as a role as praying is, or like wishing is.
I think that when you think of Zelda in the final boss fight of Wind Waker or Triforce Heroes or Ocarina of Time, she feels a bit more, or you actually fight her in Twilight Princess, but like she feels more like a big deal than perhaps Peach felt in this battle.
Yeah, totally.
But nice try.
Nice try. I mean, again, the game came out in the year 2000. Damsel in Distress, still very much a prevalent trope that hadn't really had much pushback in video games, as it were. So, I would... The main thought I had while playing those Peach sections was like, what if we got like a Secret Agent Peach game? What if we had like a stealth game where you were Secret Agent Peach? Like, that would be great. And Nintendo don't really have a stealth series. That would be amazing, in my opinion, because that's kind of a lot of her gameplay is like sneaking around places and figuring stuff out, and I really liked it. I think they need
to expand those mechanics a bit more, but
yeah, totally. Like it's very simple mechanically, but just the idea I really.
Or what
really
if we
liked.
gave her own platformer and she had powers based on each of her emotions?
Yeah, definitely pitch that, and I think Nintendo would approve it 100%. Oh boy.
That was like 6 years later than this game as well.
Yeah, it wasn't that far after, was it?
It
really wasn't that far after. And yeah, I think the final thing I'll say is talking about the symmetry and the kind of promise, I like how it starts with a party of the castle and it ends with a party of the castle, you know?
That celebration at the end is absolutely huge. And it goes on for a long time.
You go all the way through Toad Town, you know, like talking to everybody in Toad Town and... getting in the castle, and then you got the end credits where it shows, you know, people in all their places.
Like a parade.
Yes. Yeah.
Really, really good vibes of that ending. Very impressed.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed it. So, Bally, unless you have anything else to say, I think we have pretty much covered everything we can about Paper Mario in depth.
I think so. I feel very firmly rooted in the bring RPG mechanics back to Paper Mario tribe, but that is to say I should try some of the other games in this series because I think that'd be a good time. I enjoyed the writing, and that's probably the strongest aspect of this game. And the setting, honestly, it's just a great place to be in a nice RPG world where they've successfully fully realized the Mushroom Kingdom and even stuck in Yoshi's Island there. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, right? Because Nintendo, after this game, and really after the first two games, went in a direction of like, we're going to lean in on the paper theme of this, which it really wasn't that much. It's not mentioned ever here. No. It's not really like brought up as a thing. It's really just an aesthetic choice. And the thing is, it's only the characters who are paper. Everything else is like polygonal. It's like little dioramas. Last comment we have here about the art style.
It's polygonal but made of paper.
Yes, it is. Last comment we have here about the art style, Rachel says, visually the art style means it holds up better than just about any N64 game, and possibly anything of that generation that I've played, but where polygons are used rather than the paper style sprites, it does show its age. This is probably not helped by the letterboxing the Wii U Virtual Console applies. The world and the areas all feel very small too, and whilst this very much works for the diorama style presentation, there's not much to explore most of the time. All this is down to the limitations of the N64, of course, and yeah, like they couldn't have done what they do today with Origami King, where like you have origami people and paper people, and the entire thing is made of paper, and this entire river is made of paper, and they make it look really clever in the way that it's produced. You know, resource-wise, it wasn't possible. But of course, as we mentioned at the start, you know, that's kind of the point of it. It was like we're putting these sprites in here so that we can make this game as big and sprawling as it is in 3D. So yeah, simpler time and a simple way to create a very memorable aesthetic and a memorable video game, Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64. There we go, we did it. We talked about it, Bally. We've ticked it off the list. It's another classic Nintendo game that we have finished, and I hope people enjoyed us talking about it. There we go. That's the show, I think. We've spent a long time talking about video games today. Lots of video games and lots of stuff happening. Let's get on out of here and plug things and talk about the show. Bally, we would like to thank some of our patrons for helping us make this show possible. Of course, you can support us, patreon.com/thisnintendolive. But we had some new patrons join recently.
Yes.
Bally, we'll tell you them.
We have 3 brand new patrons, so thank you so much for your new patronage. They are Albert B, Kevin Q, and Rock B. Thank you so much all for your support of the show. It's hugely appreciated. And we've got to plug our $10 tier patrons as well. Thank you to all of our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my fiance Caroline. Thank you all for your $10 tier support. Yeah, we went pretty in depth on Batman Arkham Asylum on our most recent episode of this Nintendo Life. So
yeah,
head on over there for $1 and you can check out that episode.
Yeah, mini Backlog Club in a way.
Mini Backlog Club.
Check that out. Obviously, you can find us in various places across the internet. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes, on podcasting apps. You just search for This Nintendo Life, you should find us. Download us, give us 5 stars, review us, all those good things. That would be really appreciated. And that would help the show get out there, get people seeing that it exists, and maybe they would like to listen to it. And that would be good. We are also personally on social media. Obviously, you can find me on TikTok every day, just repping it, you know.
Where can we find you on TikTok?
I don't know. If you just search NBZ, I guess you'll find me. Lord NBZ, I think that's what I'm called.
NBZ. Did you try to get the name NBZ?
I think I did it through my Twitter account, and so right. I think there's like a multiple. There's like multiple names there. It's like my name is NBZ125, which I didn't choose. That I think they just chose it for me. But then it also says
you're the 125th NBZ. My
125th. I'm just too slow to the platform. No, they don't. I have no idea, man. But Lord MBZ, I think, is also listed there. I don't fucking know. Anyway, the more important thing is follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm always every day. Check me on Twitter at Lord MBZ. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Fantastic. Check us out. Check out the podcast Twitter, of course, at TNL Podcast. That's where you can get updates on the show and all those types of things. And yeah, thanks to everyone who wrote in, and of course everyone who was playing along, and hopefully you all had a good time playing this game with us. We'll be doing another one of these later in the year, probably I'd say second half. We're going to tackle Super Mario RPG, and I think it'll be an interesting comparison point.
Yeah, we'll wait for a quieter time in terms of releases, but then we'll jump into Mario RPG.
Yeah, we both have that on the Super Nintendo Classic, so that'll be fun booting that thing up again, getting that going. So yes, that pretty much is it.
MBZ.
Yes.
Can you believe that Pokemon Snap is coming out in a week?
It's pretty ridiculous, man. It's pretty ridiculous.
Like, I cannot believe this game is actually coming out and there's a thing. So yeah, hype.
Nintendo skipped the entire console that we've just been playing Paper Mario on, that would have been the perfect system for a Pokemon Snap game, and decided, nah, we're going to do it on this other one instead, which is slightly worse for it, but still will be very good. But yes, I'm excited to play that game, and maybe go back and revisit the original one at some point as well.
Yeah, give the original a go.
Yeah, because I own that, and I actually own that on Wii U.
I got for your birthday about 13 years ago.
Yes, that's true. Yes. Fantastic. Well, I think that's going to close us out. The last thing I'm going to shout out about Paper Mario that I didn't mention, I think those Koopa Bros are like Ninja Turtles references, right? Like, I think they're the Ninja Turtles.
I said that at the time.
Oh, did you?
Maybe Ninja Turtles.
Maybe I just completely missed your reference there. I'm sure Bally mentioned it. But anyway, shout out to the Ninja Turtles reference in Paper Mario. And yeah, that's it. That's us. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more podcasting goodness for you and video games and stuff. See you then. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Mario's theme from the Paper Mario soundtrack, copyright Nintendo, the year 2000.